Welcome, dear listeners. Welcome to this very interesting episode of Dice Scum.
You might
With
want to
us.
redo your intro because you very bold of you to assume it loaded in.
Ah,
Why are you doing like a
Yes.
Halloween voice? We're like a week and a half over already, man.
well, when we did Halloween, we did fucking vampire Nazis. So I didn't really feel like putting in any. I didn't feel like putting in the work to be dramatic in there.
So yeah, I'm Adam.
You heard me. I'm Greg. I am here.
I forgot my name. I think it's Biggie. It's Big. Hold on, let me look for a word to use. Big Halo. How about that? There we go. That's my gimmick for today.
I might want to speak into the mic a little bit just to make sure that everyone can hear. But yeah, we're doing something unique, and by unique I mean for the first time ever for this channel. We actually are kind of fans of this franchise, and actually we're fans of its more known franchise brother. But then bad times happened. And that's not why we didn't talk about it. We just never got around to it. We're talking about the Warhammer franchise created by GW.
And no, we're not going to say their full name, just to keep the bots from that much further away.
Oh.
In particular, we're talking about a little game called Mordheim, which, you see, back in the day, this company, it used to make a variety of scales. The most noted of which would be there was Skirmish mode, then your standard round, and then there was a version called, I think it was called Armageddon, at least in 40K. And its sister franchise, Warhammer Fantasy, had slightly similar set of scales, only instead of a jumbo point encounter, they had naval combat, which that died a very quick death.
And then they got a mediocre video game.
But Mordheim is their skirmish mode.
To a degree, yes. It's an interesting concept. It is essentially to where 40K has Necromunda, Fantasy had Mordheim.
So, since we never really talked about it on show, and I know at least some of our fans never really touched Warhammer Fantasy or even 40K, let's go a little bit into Fantasy's lore. It's not going to be super in-depth because you don't really need to know everything.
Hell, I'm willing to bet too somebody doesn't even know 40K came from Fantasy.
That's a good point. The original Rogue Trader was actually trying to port Fantasy to a sci-fi setting.
As a joke.
So, but it was a successful joke.
So Fantasy takes place on a world where magic and chaos are a big deal. And let's just kind of keep it simple. We're going to talk about the old world, which is kind of our equivalent to Europe. And we're going to zoom in a little bit more and talk about the greatest power on the old world, arguably.
The Empire of Sigmar. Or the Empire.
Greg, you don't get a chance to talk. You're the beta male. Let the alpha male Adam talk.
Anyone.
That is the official name. That is the official name. It is officially known as the Empire of Sigmar Heldenhammer, but no one calls it that. They just call it the Empire.
They're not Holy Roman Empire, so everyone speaks with German accents and speak German. Oh, I mean Reichsspiel. And
the Empire has stood as the great bastion of civilization and in progress among mankind ever since its founding hundreds of years ago. It's come a long way since then, but right now at the current setting this is in, it's a bit of in the toilet.
It's massively in the fucking toilet.
Well, no. Like, what I was gonna say was, like, it started from very humble beginnings, only to be thrown in the fucking trash where it belongs.
Just like... Oh, that's mean. Don't compare the nation with the game.
Buy our ground marines, motherfuckers. Look at this. It's like our space marines, but it's in fantasy, you cunts. Buy it.
So anyway, the Empire of Sigmar, we're just gonna call it the Empire.
Yes.
It's in the toilet at the moment. There have been periods of great success and great fucking failure. This is
Right
one of
now,
the
we're
greatest
currently-
failures it's ever experienced. It's going through a gigantic civil war in this time frame.
We here at the Dice Scum would like to advocate for 3D printing models and not giving a certain company
No,
their
they're
money.
gonna kill us. Literally.
I don't care. Viva la revolution!
Biggie, we have to make some progress.
So the Empire's going through a civil war. This has happened a few times in its history, as all
To a degree, but this is the
long-running
biggest.
kingdoms have.
This is the
Essentially,
biggest.
3 idiots. Their names don't really matter because none of them really get the title.
They all die. Let's put it this way: by the time they're all dead, the civil
there
war
are
is
5
raging on.
people that try to claim the title. The 3 idiots I'm talking about are not fucking relevant.
Did Kislav try to throw their hat in the ring, or did they just sort of...
No, they're
not-
too busy.
okay.
They're too busy suffering. They're too busy suffering.
And for those wondering, Kislev is another nation. It's a little further to the north, and it's kind of like your Lithuania, Russia, a little bit of Poland.
They exist. They exist to be the bulwark against chaos.
And chaos is a big factor. It's a big problem in the setting, but we haven't gotten there yet. So the 3 idiots are warring, and there's a 4th idiot, although he's not an idiot. He's an undead monster who's planning his moves soon. Then a big fucking meteor slams into a city called Mordheim, which... What is Mordheim? See, the Empire's divided into a bunch of provinces. And one of those provinces is one called Ostland, the most eastern march of the Empire. It's also one of the poorest, and Mordheim was its biggest city. Yeah, that went fucking right away.
It used to be known as a great city of arts, bastion, theology. It was considered a blessed city, but some felt it was beginning to lose its way. Then a meteor hit it and everything went to hell.
Yeah, and that's not great. That's not great
be
because that meteor was made out of chaos.
More specifically, it was made out of space meth.
No, it's not quite. There's 2 strains of space meth, if you're wondering in the setting. There's your normal warp stone, which is just kind of like your radioactive glowy rock. Then there's weird stone, which can only be found in the meteor that smashed into Mordheim.
It's very pure, very powerful, and very corrupting.
Which is bad.
And that's why so many groups go to the ruins of Mordheim, not only to recollect treasures that were lost. A lot of people go there for their own reasons. Some go to die, some try to find redemption, some just want that space rock. And with that in mind, I think we can actually start by going into, well, the beginning, taking it to the streets.
A primer by Mark Havener. So
either Havener it or Havener it.
So you're looking to get into a new game. And this is a great thing of when this was first written. You walk into your local game store and you're assaulted by the selection. Yes, so much choice.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can get Magic the Gathering, and hey, look, there's Magic the Gathering, and look, more Magic the Gathering.
There's some Lord of the Rings middies.
Hey, to be fair, there's probably 1 box of Settlers of Catan somewhere in there.
No, but there is probably a box of D&D 5th edition, and a couple of reprints of old stuff. Maybe a couple of weirder ones like Gaslands, or if you're feeling really spicy, some World of Darkness stuff.
All those pretty boxes, all those lovely tiles,
all
which one to buy? You ask the guy behind the counter, and he suggests Mordheim. Not anymore! But yeah, it's a good choice if you want to try something if you're new, which is actually not wrong. It is a pretty halfway decent way to enter this kind of minis stuff.
So miniatures gaming can be described as pay to win. In fact, this is one of the reasons we never really talked about minis gaming, other than BattleTech to a limited degree. Because while Biggie's a big fan of it, and Tech, who's not here because he has to currently deal with the blood from The Shining at the moment.
He got AIDS. He's currently suffering with AIDS right now. We pray for him. Press F in chat to pray for Tech Priest to get
He
rid of the
suffered
AIDS.
cranial damage trying to fix the world machine. So anyway, they like minis. I'm not much of a big fan of it because it's always kind of pay to win. Mordheim's perfect for cheapskates like me because it's very small. You see this little set of pirate gangs and mercenaries? That's about the size of your average expedition, which is perfect.
Mm-hmm. At most there's maybe like a 1 or 2 extra very special units you can buy that are going to cost you maybe $10 more than the others. But yeah,
you can get it. Well, not with GW, but with other like Privateer Press and well, GW of old, you could get away with a pretty decent little crew. So you take your advice, buy the game. You can't anymore, but what do we get with it?
Well, the rules, of which you should read.
No one tells me what to read.
This might seem obvious, but the book that comes with the game should be read. Not anymore, but this is the best we can get.
You know, the best part is the company that shall not be named too much. So much dislikes the concept of earning peripheral money that they banished this book into oblivion. Not even as a PDF. Find this on their site.
They used to have this on their site. Now it's just a dead link.
We got this from the warp, is what we did. We used our magic powers to pull it from the warp. That's how we're looking at it.
You see, what happened was I got some of the good things from Randall, and I talked with a weird, like, ammonite squid thing. I don't know what he wanted in return because he was speaking in some language I didn't get, but he got me this. Oh, wait, no, Greg did it. Oh, no, reality's exploding.
Yeah, we should move on before the word's corruption is complete. Irregardless, there's really 5 skipping a bit of the fluff. There's really 5 sections to this book that needs to be talked about. The setting and story, the rules themselves, how warbands work, how a campaign works, and optional rules. In case you want to do that kind of things.
Yep.
Here's where we'll be reading but obviously the most important section are the rules on warbands. Everything else is kind of more fluff.
Yep, and we're just going to skim through to kind of give you an idea on the different factions. Because they show good examples of the model. So these are what you call Averlanders and Ostlanders. Averland and Ostland are both provinces of the Empire. Since Mordheim kind of exploded, it makes good sense for both of them to investigate what the hell happened and try to contain anything that comes out of the city. And also loot it, because, that's just what you did. That's just what you did as a soldier. Then there are Kislavites. We mentioned them a little bit. They are the nation to the north. And they are also kind of curious about this place. Ostland's kind of close to their borders. And they're mostly in it for the loot and also to kill anything that might stab into their back, because they're already having to fight chaos in the north. They don't want to see more of it in the south.
But the great unique thing about Kislev, bears.
Yep, they worship a bear god rather than Sigmar, which is their chief god of. Basically, Sigmar founded the Empire and became a god. Kislevs worship some other thing. He worships They worship bears and ice princesses.
Mm-hmm. They might be relevant later. They're
a little relevant, but not so much.
Oh, hold on. We got the orcs right here. I want to read the orcs.
So this is an interesting thing. Fantasy always has, your orcs, goblins, hobgoblins, right? Well, fantasy did them a bit differently.
Players that love a little bit of wackiness and risk can enjoy this warband. Orcs are certainly no great thinkers, but they're always entertaining. Orc warbands tend to favor a direct, close combat strategy, perhaps supported by a few goblins armed with short bows. Their shaman magic shares the same brutal and direct qualities as the orcs themselves. To further support the idea that this warband is as blunt as implemented, we gain access to a troll. While
Trolls
quite
exist
expensive,
in the setting. They're just if you've ever played D&D, they kind of work like that, only they're even stupider, worse smelling, and their regeneration's even more crazy.
Basically saying Trolls is a big motherfucker not to fuck with. Nice side effect of his regeneration. Was that an actual thing in the troll folklore? I always see shit about trolls regenerating.
I don't know. I'd have to
Generally,
look
don't
that
know.
up.
It's most likely one of those things that someone came up with it and someone else took it and ran with it, and it's been running with it ever
Even
since.
Even the worst wounds will regenerate eventually, but most big guys you can take from other warbands are also quite pricey. There's a certain advantage to having one that can never be killed.
Or,
So basically,
trolls
the orcs,
can be killed.
basically, orcs
but
are
it's quite hard.
basically orcs are the screaming retards of the world, and everybody loves them. And
They are unironically based off of football hooligan culture of the 80s and 90s, implemented into a world of magic and swords.
So that's why if you ever hear people do these, Cockney accents and say they's gonna crump you, well, that's why. They's based on the hooligans of the 80s. Kind of like how in Glorantha the dwarves were based on programmers from the 70s.
And because 40K literally just ported vast amounts of their lore from fantasy, that also ports. But here they're not called orcs with a K; they're just orcs with a C.
Also, they have a culture. They're actually a kind of functioning culture a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And the gobbo, and you can't undersell the gobbos.
Goblins in
They're gonna
fantasy
die horribly.
actually are relevant. They are not complete jokes. They are actually quite scary.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, the other section mentioned in this is the high swords. Since a big part of this thing is that people who come to Mordheim, the players and because you're essentially the players technically kind of take the role of the paymaster for the most part. Your soldiers, they're not really here for any ideological reasons.
Most of the time.
But even the more ideologicals can pick up mercenaries, because there are a lot of them bumping around. These hired swords can be, as they say, hired swords are probably best introduced to a game into campaigns rather than one-off games, because if it's a one-off game, then it can be a bit unfair. But like if you pick up a good mercenary for your long-running campaign, it can be a nice little thing.
Yeah, here's examples of some hired swords, and that you can see they definitely run the gamut.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them seem to be based on. There's other nations in the old world that we're not talking about too much, but there are parallels to France.
Yeah,
there are parallels to France, Italy, and Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of see
They're not really relevant though. They aren't really relevant though. Yes, we have halflings.
Yep, let me see if I can scroll to find him. There he is. Imagine the hobbits from Lord of the Rings, but very much exaggerated. Like to the point where they literally refuse to leave their lands. They actually live in the Empire.
Mm-hmm. They may or may not have they may or may not. I'm not going to say anything. Let's just say they're actually pretty close to the Lord of the Rings hobbits in the sense that they don't really get involved in the major players. Except this time there hasn't been a case where one brave little hobbit, a halfling, gotta keep the on brand, right? Hasn't gone up and saved the world from evil. Yeah, exactly. We can't use them.
What you need to understand about halflings in the Warhammer setting, basically they don't exist. The camera's never on them. They're not important whatsoever, so don't even think about them. I'm not wrong, and you know it.
They mostly just punch skeletons and sit around and drink tea.
And they even have models in.
Yes,
they do. They used to have a small army.
Mm-hmm. They're great unique weapon that they've contributed to the Empire. The halfling cook cannon.
Yep. Also, you note that elves do exist. There's an elven ranger here. Yes, elves exist, and they are, again, Tolkien, but exaggerated. In this case, their pride and arrogance are exaggerated.
We're not even going to go into their lore and the incest plot lines. We're not even going to talk
about it. But
there's a lot of lore for each of these races, and there's races we haven't even talked about yet that don't matter.
Yeah, and the elves really don't matter here.
The only reason they'll matter is you can actually occasionally hire one to join your band.
Mm-hmm. And
Well-
speaking of the people below them, this is another one of the factions. The fanatical. If we've mentioned the evil fanaticals, let's talk about the good guy fanaticals.
Okay, so let me
Quote, unquote.
briefly get into chaos is a real force in Warhammer. It's a real force in the setting, and it is very destructive, and there are cults dedicated to worshipping entities that were born from chaos. There's 4 big ones and a slew of other smaller ones.
Mhm.
Witch hunters, they're the opposite. See, in early fantasy, there used to be a concept, an opposing variant called the Lords of Order. Basically, the gods and goddesses that were the opposite of chaos. And these guys kind of loosely worship them, or are other religious fanatics that have gone so fanatic that they basically seek to destroy whatever they see as wrong or corrupted.
These witch hunters, in specifically, are associated with the Order of the Templars of Sigmar, because as Sigmar's influence
So they're
grew
not
and grew over
worshipping law gods. These are just crazy Sigmarites.
For the most part, these men see
dog.
see what has happened to Mordheim as righteous destruction of what they believe was an improper and degenerate city, and now they roam the city, working to purge heretics, heathens, and collect the vile word stones to keep it out of the hands out of any diabolical means
And
through fire and sword.
don't forget to stab anybody that looks at him funny.
Yeah, that's the sword.
So you can kind of see that earlier games when the GW line had some funny things. In particular, let me zoom in because I think some of you might have noticed him. There's a dude with a puppet that has an axe as he's wielding an axe.
Oh my god.
Mhm. But yes, the witch hunters are either made up of crazy they're all fanatical, so I'm not even going to bother keep mentioning fanatical. Crazy witch hunters who have the authority of a pistol and a sword and can just tell you to die. There are
Crazy
just the
priests.
regular zealots. Yeah, the regular zealots who they have enough sanity to wear armor.
And then
Then
there's
there
the
are the
one who think
flatulence.
they are be cursed of the
Yeah.
gods and wish to seek a redemption through essentially
Yeah.
pain.
Yeah, then they're the flagellants. They don't wear anything, and they just run ahead wanting to die. But they want you
Well,
to
they
die.
don't really
just want
want
you
to
die.
die. They believe that the sins they've committed have to be basically burned
Cleansed with
into
pain.
them.
They are unbreakable. They are essentially unbreakable zealots who will fight to the death.
The best way, yeah, they're glass cannons. They hit pretty hard, but they die like frogs in a blender.
Mm-hmm.
All in all, these ones kind of make a lot of sense. Like the other ones that we showed, orcs and goblins love to loot from other nations. Mainly because while they have a civilization, they're not that technologically advanced, but they do like some of the cool things that Dayumis, as they call them, make. So they're just in it for the loot.
And the Forden.
The fighting too, because there's a lot of idiots in this city that they gotta fight.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a group that you'll not see anymore in ever. These got rid of really early on, and I think they were only introduced in Mordheim.
Yeah, because in the lore, essentially they were a weird cult that grew out of the city because of some artifacts or whatever. And as I mentioned,
they were purged
funny
by
enough,
a man. They were purged by a woman by the witch hunters.
Yeah. Funnily enough, those witch hunters are actually technically here to kill them all too, because the official canon sees them all as a weird cult and want them dead. The Sisters of Sigmar, essentially, it's an all-female organization, and to just boil down what they are in a mechanical stat, they are the heavy armor faction.
Yep, they needed heavy armor.
Mm-hmm. These guys, even their low-rank members, are they have high hit points, high armor, and they're not allowed to bring like monsters and other things and other like more impressive units. They actually have more magical-based miracle workers typically.
And yeah, lore-wise, if you're wondering, they actually explain these are the survivors from the city, an all-woman occult that survived out of the Sigmarite temples that just kind of looted the armor and weapons from the guards and nobles. That's why the witch hunters want them to die.
And besides, this is still
Because they
medieval setting.
survived, they're tainted, and they're women, but they're tainted.
Yeah.
This is a boys' club. Women go out.
It's more that they're tainted now in later prints, but there's a bit of the whole, that thing.
A woman. Yeah.
And here's a very interesting take. Hobos. I mean, dwarves.
Dwarfs.
So dwarves do exist. They're actually one of the more noted powers. I didn't bring them up in the lore setup. Basically, dwarves they don't really love, but appreciate and despise history with men. With the Empire, they're kind of forever in the debt because Sigmar helped them out a long time ago. But the thing is, dwarves are a bit interesting compared to their fantasy brethren. We saw the hyper focus of the dwarves of Athos. These ones are also hyper focused in some ways. They're driven by grudges. Essentially, dwarves are unable to let things go psychologically unless recompensed in some way.
And recompense is not usually through, kind discussion where they work up. No, it's usually through an axe to the head.
But usually what causes a grudge is because they weren't recompensed, and that person's not likely to give them what they're owed.
And dwarves live a lot, and you know the saying, "An elephant never forgets." Well, neither does a fucking dwarf, and a dwarf can live well over 100 years.
So, as for why these guys are here, they're literally just a clan looking to find treasure.
And
these ones aren't out for blood, usually.
Or in the case of that ginger, death.
So they actually do a little nod. For those of you who are curious, dwarves are driven by grudges, and they're essentially they have to fulfill them or fulfill their lot in the clan. If they feel that they've failed in their duties, they go completely mad and essentially go on death quests. They actively seek ways to die. And if you really want to get an idea on the setting, there's a great series of books that used to be around where a noble promised a dwarfen slayer, because that's what they're called, slayers, that he'll archive his quest for death. And what you'll see is slayers will intentionally be as rowdy, insulting, and basically trying to pick fights as possible because he wants to fucking die. But they won't kill themselves. It's just something that they don't do.
But in regards to what these dwarves bring to the table, well, first off, we got to address
the best combat beasts that they have.
Yeah, but we got to address the short man in the room. They're short, and that has an actual effect. And they're walking. There's that, as it mentions below, they barely beat a zombie in a 100-meter dash.
They're slow, yes.
What they do bring to the table is combat experience, heavy armor, and firepower.
Dwarves have the best firearms exist in the setting, and dwarves easily have the best firearms in the game.
And like the sisters, even their low armor, even their low level grunts are going to be packing heavy armor, probably a shield,
and a high quality weapon.
A shield. Essentially, dwarves where they are the ultimate tar pits. Even a single unit can be a great tar pit if you build it right.
And they're pretty good at surviving encounters. They take wounds, but they're able to keep going.
And then for one of the warbands that didn't really get that much thing, because once again they're not really relevant to the thing.
Elves are the thing. Basically, there's some high elves that are trying to figure out what the hell happened to the city, because Weirdstone is highly refined and unique warpstone. Warpstone being chaos-infused rock.
Yeah, and these guys are the Black Ops units of the great Atlantean Empire, which, no joke, is hilariously what the elves are actually kind of based on. They're based on Atlantis.
That's actually why their armor is vaguely Greek-inspired.
And it looks like, Atlantis looks like a giant donut.
It's pretty great. So, yeah, the elves here are mostly just Black Ops units. They're ranged specialists. They're quick, and they hit hard from a distance. They tend to fall apart pretty quickly in melee. Ah, yes. I mentioned that there was an undead butthole in the plot who was planning to become the fourth guy to try to claim the Empire's crown. This is not him, but this is one of his, not really race, they're vampires. Vampires exist in the setting. And, well, there's a lot of dead bodies in Mordheim after the accident.
And a unique property of Warp and Wordstone is that it can supercharge magic. And what do you think an aspiring vampiric necromancer would probably want a lot of as he's building his giant army?
And that's the thing. All undead is magic-based, and all vampires have some skill with necromancy, usually.
Which is why the majority of their warband is made up of zombies.
So there's a good reason for vampires, and there is a part of the Empire, kind of, that's like Transylvania, and that's where these guys come from.
Rania. The von Karsteins send their scions out, or essentially they've sent their lower ranked nobles out, along with a few of their mortal servants, to collect the Wordstone.
Yep, and if you're wondering, the von Karsteins are the family that become the fourth hat in the Imperial Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And they are the ones that come closest to getting it. There's one guy who does. I'll just mention it for those curious. He's known as Magnus the Good.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that kind of came out of nowhere and basically fixed everything.
Yeah. But
the undead brings to the table as a warband is they have some of the best impressive units in the game. A vampire is a combat beast, and you're always going to have one of these guys leading your party. And he essentially is going to fucking carry. He's going to carry your team along
because
with
most
your
of your units are garbage.
Yeah, but the thing those shitty zombies do though, fear and terror,
and they're replaceable.
Oh yeah, they doesn't fucking matter if they get smashed to hell. If it can just be resurrected, and even if it is damaged enough, who cares? It's not like they get.
I'll just resurrect the adventurers I killed as my new zombie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Basically, their playstyle is you have a couple of very important characters that you have to keep around, and then trash you just throw.
Mm-hmm. They tar pit, hold up important units, or maybe go off and collect the objective because it's not. We're not getting into it, but Mordheim isn't just about killing; it's also about objectives.
And everyone has their own objectives. We will get into that into the rule list proper. These are just to give a basic overview. Ah, yes, these are fun. My favorite.
People went crazy. Let's just put it simply. When the giant meteorite hit their home, a lot of people didn't come out with their sanity intact.
So here's the thing: chaos is a force. We mentioned it, and we mentioned their cults. There are 4 major cults dedicated to the Lord of War, the Lord of Excess, the Lord of Decay, and the Lord of Trickery.
And
this is a new one.
But they're an offshoot of the Lord of Trickery and Change, but different nonetheless. The Possessed.
Imagine being a chaos cult and being too much of a fucking hipster to worship the main 4.
Well,
no, they still give honor.
There's a bit of lore indicating that this might be a new god. See, the meteor was unique. And these guys seem to worship something different. They may have come from the Lord of Trickery, his name being Tzeentch. But these are a completely different animal.
Mm-hmm.
And their big thing is, they also are similar to the undead. They use a lot of trash. But their trash is of higher quality than the undead.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually armored at least lightly.
Mm-hmm. They've got some heavy hitters in with their Dark Souls. They're mostly heavy armor, heavy hitting troops. They've got their cultists with the bows. They've got their cultists with the bows and daggers. They've got magic casters. But the thing that makes them unique are their mutants.
Yep, mutation is a thing that exists in this setting. It is also frowned upon for a good reason. Mutation is 999 times out of 1,000 the effect of chaos on you. These guys look at those and say, "Hey, can I get crazier?" And they just, yeah. That's a mutant up front. These are their hero units, and they're dangerous as hell.
And the really great thing about mutations is they're typically RNG based,
and
which means you could have a mutant that got like there's no real bad mutations, but some of them are just not ideal. Like let's say maybe you had a mutant that was really set up as a well, obviously they're all going to be damage dealers, but you set one up to maybe be maybe a sword and shield. Nope, his left hand turned into a tentacle. Can't hold a shield anymore.
And there's one more element that you can add in that they mention, and this is another race that is prevalent in the Empire that causes trouble. We haven't gotten to the other race that actually doesn't exist. But they mentioned that Beastmen are a thing you can incorporate into them. So if you're wondering, Beastmen they're a specific strain of mutant that form a primitive, basically Paleolithic societies in the forests. They poop in the woods, they hate organization of all sorts, and they literally want to return the world to monkey. They are also, like, despite how jokey they sound, they're also one of the bigger threats you have to worry about in the setting.
They are fast breeding. They have an ingrained hatred of humanity. They are very good at not being detected when they don't want to be, and they will always find the way to join the biggest, baddest threats.
Essentially, imagine dudes with the head of a goat who wield stone axes, braying laughingly, and that's the weak type, and they're stronger than you still. The bigger ones are like 3 times your size and wield fucking stone swords that slam into you, and they can rip apart a house with their bare hands. Yeah, you can put one of them into the possessed. They accept beastmen into their ranks.
Because they are subject of change.
This race, they don't exist. Moving on.
Yeah, they don't exist so much that this is actually the clan of the race that doesn't exist even by their own race that doesn't exist.
Okay, so that's a regular meme for those of you who are unaware. Skaven are the rat people, and also a fun gag that I like to bring up. The nation responsible for creating them were the Italians.
That it's a long story, but
they're a race of rat people that live underground. They are completely fucking insane, and they are a race of addicts. In particular, they're addicted to warpstone. Weirdstone is warpstone is like cocaine. Weirdstone is like crack. These are a race of addicts.
But these addicts are willing to kill for their warpstone, for their weirdstone.
That's why they're there, and they're trying to be quiet about it because that's their big thing. They don't like to be spotted because that goes against the plan. You see, the plan that they have to destroy the manlings. They're
Technically,
a race of conspiracy theorists, and they're crazy, and they build like garbage. They build out of garbage, but they're so creatively insane that they can create a variety of things.
But they are essentially, to describe their strategy, they are the penultimate swarm race.
Yeah, their units are
even their hero units are dirt cheap, and typically the main thing that makes their heroes stand out is not because they're great melee fighters, it's that they're good ranged fighters, and they pick you off while the trash holds you in line.
It should also be mentioned too, the notorious fucking cowards.
Oh yeah, God, yes.
They are. And another fun thing is, they're mostly frail, but occasionally they think, why not make a big guy? So they'll make a big guy, and that's called a rat ogre. Essentially, they're prone to experimentation and design, and one of the things they figured out is how to mutilate their own race into creating giant monsters. And then they'll throw them at you.
It's pretty fucking horrible.
But yeah, as we reach the end of the book, we've got the nice author here with his little picture.
That's the expression.
Say hi to Mark. Say hi to Mark. Hi, Mark.
That's Mark's face when he realized they deleted his PDF from their website.
Anyway, let's move on to the book.
House
Let's move
chat.
Oh
on
no,
to
before
part.
we do, I always like to look
Okay.
at chat.
Yeah, the chat's actually been pretty active. Yeah.
Active-ish. For all 5 of you here tonight, thank you for joining us.
All right, so
How
War
you all
Master
doing
for
tonight, y'all?
Fantasy, original 40k parody of Yeah, it was a fantasy in space. Example of great failure. The Emperor literally sold the prop. Yeah, there's been good emperors and bad emperors, Impsit. That one was one of the bad ones. He literally sold. There's several provinces. One of them was Marienburg. He sold that to their richest nobles, essentially, and just because he wanted money. Oh
In all
yeah.
fairness, the Empire was in significant debt after after the Orcs went through and burned a lot of it.
Oh yeah, and if you play, there's Crusader Kings 2. Yeah, there is a mod. It's called Geheimnisnacht. Basically, it takes place exactly around this time. Mordheim became a city in Florida once the meteor hit.
Oh
With all the
my
meth.
god.
We got 2 Fs for Tech Priest.
Yeah, F for Tech Priest. He'll be fine. He just needs to stop trying to fix the world machine. Moving on before the world ends. Too late. Sigmar already happened. Yeah. I found the site with PDFs for Don't link it. They're crazy.
Yeah.
What
isn't exaggerated in Warhammer? What isn't exaggerated in Warhammer?
Yes.
The pain of death.
They have a soup tank. Yep, halflings do. An unpicked troll
Do not look up pygmies. Do not look up the pygmies.
Flagellants remind me of the Repentia.
They're hilarious.
Yeah, the Repentia are literally just flagellants that are just gender swapped. That's a grudgeon. Gotrek lives. Yeah. Gotrek. Yep, that's the story of that's the name of the Slayer, by the way, for those wondering.
Of a great Slayer with his great long book series. And yes, the story of the dwarves destroying a castle because they got shortchanged 2 pennies.
That is an
extreme
version of how dwarves can get. 9 times out of 10, you can usually just get away from that point just by paying them the Were Guild.
To Imp Kit, yes, you're right. Magic is still Magnus hasn't happened yet though, so magic is still legal, and that's later Mordheim lore. That's kind of it's kind of one of those. Yeah, probably, but at the same time, it's one of those that's, like I said, a bit later lore. So if you don't, you can take it and leave it if you want to.
Yep, Magnus the Pious, creator of the Colleges of Magic. He was the one that won. The Possessed worship Bellicor. Yeah. Essentially, the Chaos group that live here worship a different entity as their chief god.
Yeah. He's the Everloser, but and
yeah, Imperial Province too. Yeah, Beastmen did destroy the Drakwold.
Yeah, that incompetence, but yeah.
More Warpstone endings.
Yeah. Oh, also, as I mentioned before, you mentioned before with flamethrowers, miniguns. Yeah, that's not the clan that showed up here. They have better things to do. Now, the people that showed up are. Essentially, they're one of the lower ranking clans that don't have as much influence because the people who do have influence don't hired you guys to do the job because why would they send their expensive weapon teams to do this? We could just have what's the lives of a few hundred slaves?
Why send the good stuff to take
going back to the comment of Going back to the comment of the Everloser, I would like to state for the record, all of them are Everlosers. The only reason why Archeon ever won was because Geedubz, because of a certain company basically favoring them.
Don't worry, the real canon
There's
is
a certain event that we may or may
like
not get to one day. We'll get to that one day, maybe.
Grimgor is a big orc character. I like to imagine that, what happened was he won.
The biggest there ever was.
Also, yeah, I think that was a different emperor, but it might have been the same that sold the province to the halflings. That one wasn't stupid, though.
But, that guy doesn't even. I don't think he's happened yet in the timeline.
Yeah, Marienburg is still a part of the Empire.
If halflings are so good, then why aren't they in Total Warhammer? Checkmate, Atheist.
Anyway,
we're on to the rules book itself. Mordheim. Here's
the wonderful symbol of a wonderful dead bird.
That actually is very fitting for what the city's like. So you can thank these people for making them.
And this is going to
contents. It's split apart, so we'll get into it.
This part is going to be not really any lore, so we're not going to go into that. This is mostly the crunch.
Yep, they just go into a little bit about the conflict itself. The opposing factions are represented by models. They just kind of tell you how it works. Building a warband, at first you'll probably want to play individual games rather than a campaign. That'll allow you to learn the rules, and that's not a bad idea.
But the unique thing about campaigns is that you can bring the same character, not just the same models, but the same characters to each fight, and they can gain experience and even improvements with equipment.
It's actually kind of similar to, well, it's very similar to Adventurers League back when Adventurers League weren't no fun allowed weirdos. Basically, like Adventure Leagues, you can bring the same guys as long as you have an officiated match. You can be like, oh yeah, this is Gilzog. This is Gilzog the Slaughterer, the great orc guy that I had last 3 matches in Mordheim.
Yeah, he's gonna beat up all of your characters.
He fucking sold that rat ogre.
And as long as you have confirmation that Gilzog did exist and lived for those 3 matches, you can bring him to the 4th match.
And by then he's picked up some experience. He might even have a magic sword.
A magic sword that he then covered in spikes, because as you do.
But yeah, it also mentions different objectives, because not every faction's here for the same reason. Like the Skaven are here for their wordstone, but the witch hunters, well, they probably want some wordstone too.
Characteristics. Sorry about that. I didn't know how far ahead we were. This actually, here's the characteristics for mini games.
Oh, sorry, we're still on the same first page.
Oh, okay. So for characteristics, these are how the game itself works. There's movement rate, which is how far they can return. For example, typical humans can move up to 4 inches, while Skaven can move 5 inches. And that is a thing. In minis gaming, you measure it with a literal fucking ruler. And while that is kind of amusing,
tabletop simulator,
it's pain. There's weapon skill, which that's how good you are with hitting.
It's not damage though. It's how It's not how hard you hit. It's how accurate you are.
Strength governs your damage and how much you can carry.
Toughness is how well you can take a blow.
Wounds are how many pips you can get. Most units, when you just start, only have 1. There's a couple that have more. If you get below 1, if you get below the number, you die. Your character just dies.
Well, sometimes it's die, but if you're playing a campaign, they may not die, or they might just take an injury.
Yep. There's initiatives. These are how fast they are. There's attacks, which is how many times you can hit. And leadership is because you have leader units. If your army is getting its shit wrecked, you need to make leadership rolls to hold them.
Or if you try and send a Skaven slave to fight a zombie, the Skaven slave just might go, no.
So Skavens usually have bad leadership. They even give an example. Skavens usually have bad leaderships, while an elf usually has higher, because elves are very self-sure, and they're jerks, but they have enough good qualities about them that you'd probably listen to them as long as they didn't, screw you over. And there's certain characteristics where you just straight up get zeros.
Yeah, it just means they don't have any talent. Like, for instance, a rat ogre does not know how to use a crossbow, so it has no ballistic skill.
I would like to go back to that comment of the Skaven. If you were to hold a vegetable up to his head, he would probably run screaming in terror. That's how bad they are when they're not in groups.
I'm just envisioning as a gag, like the regular thing you can do with cats, where you just put like a pickle or a cucumber behind them and they jump in terror. I'm just envisioning like a random Skaven like initiative clan. There's a clan of ninja ratmen. Like their initiation is just to put carrots behind the Skaven's head, and they just jump and startle them. Like and it's great. I love it. I love that mental image. And here's an example of what your profiles would look like for a character.
But here's the important thing that in relation to the campaign mechanics. As you fight in more games against other players, your warriors will get better and their characteristics can increase. All these are detailed recording the warband roster sheets, which we'll look at later. But essentially, yes.
What page are you on?
It's still the same thing with Dieter. It's literally right below Dieter Stahl's name.
Sorry, you know how I joked about you can't tell me what to read? Sometimes that happens.
Oh no,
Sorry.
he's not actually reading.
I can read. I can read. I just choose
Yeah,
not to.
sorry. It was
sometimes.
just below Dieter's names. They were mentioning the fact that you can upgrade stats and stuff like that. Then their characteristic skill, which use a D6 system to determine how well they do on certain tasks.
So that's
Like,
why
for
you
instance-
see the numbers here.
Like, say you want to climb up your archer wants to climb up this piece of rubble to get a better vantage point. He's going to have to make a climb check.
So like let's say that would probably be movement, a movement roll.
And maybe a strength roll if he has to like pull himself up like a high.
So let's go with strength. So let's say for Dieter, you roll your d6 and you roll a 4. That
Plus
means
3?
Dieter. No, it's just 4, because it's at or below. If you roll a 4, Dieter can't do it. If you rolled a 3 or 2, Dieter can climb up. Thing to note, on 6s, you just straight up fail. Sorry, bud, you just don't make it.
Yeah.
Even if you have a leadership of 7 or 8, or like a toughness of 8, which is insane. No, pal, you just got screwed.
Yeah, and then they mention how leadership works. It essentially, for example, Dieter's leadership is a 7, so to pass a leadership scale, he has to roll 7 or less on his scale. So in this case, higher is worse.
Yep, because you have to roll 2 dice. For leadership,
it has
is
to
unique.
roll. Yeah, you have to. Essentially, the way it works is with the amount of dice you have to roll below or at the number your stat is.
So for most of the results, except attacks and wounds, you can just kind of get away with the d6. Leadership is different. You use 2 d6. And there are certain phases and turns.
Then they have right in the beginning the turn sequence. First thing that always happens first is your recovery phase, where essentially as the rotation ends again, there's essentially a bit of a morale check to see. There's a bit of a check to see if people are kind of get their bearings. If say they've been knocked to the ground or they've been frightened.
So if you just have a bunch of Skaven screaming in panic like a possum, this is the stage where you try to have your leader scream at them and beat them until they stop panicking as much and go back towards
or maybe they realized the scary zombie is far enough away that they can turn around and shoot it.
Then or let's say Dieter, he falls on his butt because he tried to climb up the hill and he's on the floor. This is the time for him to get up.
Speaking of getting up, movement is it's where you move your minis around.
And
it's
you
not
use
that hard.
use your rulers.
Shooting,
Which is first.
Ranged combat happens. Ranged combat happens before hand to hand, which means if you have a pretty ranged heavy party, you might against a melee heavy party, you might be able to. Yeah, you might be able to, knock down a lot of their heavy hitters before they even get to you.
The lunatic who uses a soul-only dwarven quarrelers, which are their gunmen.
And then, of course, there's the choppy part.
And that's the part where if you have a mostly ranged army, have fun.
Also, as they kind of mentioned in the recovery phase, there are some cases where your units will never get a chance to recover. They won't be able to take leadership chests. Say, for instance, if your unit is running away, but a direwolf is chasing it, he can't recover. He's just running.
Yep, and the closest unit to the model cannot be an enemy model.
Yeah, as I said, if you have one of your units pursuing the enemy, they can't rally back. So essentially, which can be really useful if, say, you got really lucky and you terrified a hero unit. You can just send your one of your trash units that really he's just or maybe even a wounded unit after him, because so long as he's close enough, he can't recover.
You send Bubs the zombie to scare off the dwarven treasure hunter that it has survived several battles because he utterly failed his composure ability. You just send a crap zombie. It'll work. So
Yeah, and then it has the version how movement works. There are charges, compulsory moves where you can force something to move in a certain way.
Yep, and you have to declare beforehand on these.
Well, compulsory move is essentially, in the usual cases, I'm fleeing.
Yep,
and then
that's
there's
if you fail
normal
your fear.
Yeah, and then there's just your normal shuffling around, repositioning, and stuff like that.
Yep, because you can only move up to, depending on your movement value, that number of inches.
And they actually have on the page, they have on page 10 actually a really good diagram of like how exactly, because sometimes people get a little confused about like what's attack, like in D&D people are like, what's attack of opportunity, when can I do an attack of opportunity. They have like a really clear diagram here of what is an interception, how you intercept people that move by you.
So there's an intercepting distance, from what it looks like, is about halfway. Is about half of a move.
And you have to be at least 1 meter. You have to be within a meter of them.
No, those are inches.
Inches, yeah, my bad, inches. Essentially, you have to. It just has a very clear example of what's the range an interception can happen at. Say, for instance,
which is about 2 inches.
Yeah, which means if, say, two of your dwarves are standing right next to each other, and one of the dwarves gets charged, the dwarf standing next to him can't. They can't say, "Oh, I intercept." No, that you can't do that. But if that dwarf was in the middle of the charge, kind of like in the way, he can, slam his axe into the side while he's running up.
Yep, and they actually show you it's only up to diagonal. They put a lot of effort showing that.
Speaking of which, there's some good art. I think we should mention the art because they're showing off the art now. It's pretty good.
It's pretty low quality due to the scan, but yes, the art is quite nice. I love the zombie clown holding Yorick's skull that's vomiting out blood. Very, very 90s.
And then there's, just more rules about movement, moving,
terrain.
climbing.
Yep, terrain's a big thing that you have to keep in mind.
Remember the good days where you could customize a model without being without some asshole coming in basically saying you can't play with custom models, you gotta buy our official TM models.
The company that shall not be named did that, by the way.
Yeah, speaking of terrain, that's the thing that's more on the game master's point of view, because they are the ones that are going to be designing the maps.
Yeah, so like we have the thing that doesn't exist trying to fight, which looks like a Minuteman from a Revolutionary War game. Well, it's really up to best judgment.
For a minute there, I thought you were gonna say Minutemen from the critically acclaimed game Fallout 4.
Fuck off.
I wasn't even thinking of that. So Ratman can move usually about 5 inches. So he can get up to the ledge fine.
But with a charge, he might be able. He'd be able to move into range to charge.
He might need to make like the equivalent of a movement check.
Yeah, especially because there's a 5-foot drop.
Well, 5-inch.
5-inch width. Yeah.
These are tiny models.
Yeah, but there's a 5-inch drop from where his terrain is to a thing, so he have to make a check to see if he jumps down. Yeah, he might. Regardless, he's gonna go down. The question is he gonna fall down on his face?
And if it does, then you get the comedic image of this rat thing falling on the face, going, "I've fallen and I can't get up."
Oh my god!
There is actual falling too.
Yeah, a model that falls takes D3 hits of strength equal to the height in inches they fell. So a model that falls 4 inches takes D3 at strength 4. Ow.
Yeah. So a very viable method, depending on the terrain, is to just push them.
Or kite. Say, for instance, you're the Skaven, and you're these agile little buggers, but you're being chased by the Sisters of Sigmar, and you just jump off the ledges. And especially since it says your armor has no effect on the damage, which means those big sisters and all their heavy armor means nothing, because when they fall, they die just as easily as you do.
And then the Skaven loot their armor. So here's for shooting, and it actually shows you how cover works.
if you're completely hidden, you can't shoot them.
Yep, and if you're partially hidden, you take a penalty, and this is actually a very common win at all costs douchebag move. I didn't see it in this game because I never played it, but I've seen it in other minis games at the time, where they would go, well, actually, the guy is at least like partially in cover. Bro, just because your right leg is behind a wall doesn't mean you're not completely screwed.
Even when we have rules, everybody is acting like a bunch of fourth graders with their action figures.
Like you see that guy with the crossbow there? That's the well, actually, I should have a bonus to avoid getting shot.
It depends also on the angle. For instance, if the guy's shooting you from that angle, yeah, you get a bit of cover. If the shooter's behind him, then no, there's no cover.
Or if the shooter is, let's say, 90 degrees from those guys, I'd say that guy wouldn't get cover, but the other two would. Well, maybe the first guy not.
Mm-hmm. It all depends on exactly.
The second guy would.
Because yeah, especially mini games, some ninjas just gonna have to literally like kind of put your face right where the model is to determine, okay, how much of that guy can my guy see?
Yeah, because if you're wondering if I ever officiate a minis game, which probably won't happen, it's not my cup of tea usually. My rule of thumb is you have to at least be halfway undercover for the benefits of cover to apply.
Mm-hmm. And they have some rules based on how shooting also works, in the sense that you can't really start if you have, let's say, 2 crossbowmen, and there's 2 targets. There's a screaming Norscan berserker, Vikings, Chaos Vikings, running up screaming blood for the blood god at you guys, and there's a mage in the back line.
You have to shoot the berserker.
Yeah, because you think it from the character's point of view is they don't want the guy with the screaming axes getting to them.
Like, yes, academically, Magic Man is worse, but Jesus Christ, he's gonna kill me if I don't shoot him first.
Yeah.
There are some bonuses that negate this rule, right? Or
essentially for instance, if the giant rat ogre is right behind the Norscan, you could shoot that rat ogre instead, because even if he's not as close, big.
Yeah.
Big.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you are always allowed to shoot at enemies that are prone and helpless too, or fleeing.
You choose to because they're not an immediate
threat. The most immediate threat, yeah. If you're not busy, though, you can still do it, though.
Mm-hmm. And here's some examples. So target A is behind cover, so it's harder to hit than the more distant targets. Targets B, C, and D. In this situation, the fire would shoot at B, even though A is about to smash him in the face. This is showing an exception. If they're undercover, you go for the one that isn't first.
Mm-hmm.
Not like as a strategy. That's literally the rule. You're governed to do this.
Mm-hmm. But they're trying to implement like some sort of rules and stuff like that. I will say this: it takes a bit of some of the choice,
but there's reasons for it. Also, for a second there, I thought that bug was real.
I noticed it, but it's also a way it cuts down on the indecision, because I think if anyone who's played a tabletop game can understand that sometimes there are a few players who just sit there.
I should shoot this guy. No, that doesn't make any sense. Maybe I should shoot this guy. Look, Dave, please.
Shoot someone. Shoot me. For God's sakes, I don't care anymore.
Maybe I should shoot myself.
Mm-hmm.
Dave!
And when shooting from elevation, you get actually more advantages to see who you shoot. For instance, being closer doesn't really matter. Whoever's closer doesn't really matter as much to you.
And actually, they show you the skill levels of a shooter and the roll needed. And hypothetically, you can get to the point where you don't need a roll.
Yeah, because it's such an easy shot.
The thing is, though, I think you still have to, because 6 is an auto fail.
Yeah, it's essentially your fucking bowstring twanged. What?
I said it was 1. That's a fail.
No, 1's good.
No, 1 is good, and it's like the percentile system, which sounds a little weird, but it kind of makes sense. That's
you want to roll at or below.
If you've played the Fantasy Flight games for Dark Heresy or for Fantasy Adventure, a lot can kind of apply. You're just using D6s instead of the D percentile.
Mm-hmm.
And here's
And
a
now
helpful wound chart. And actually, you and it shows where your toughness and how many wounds you start with.
Yeah, and like, even if you start with 1 wound, that doesn't mean you die on the first hit, because, you know, you could get lucky and the guy had like a shitty club and he just didn't do enough damage to even really hurt you through your armor.
Yeah, and there's also the fact that like your toughness and strength actually, I think, give you additional wounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, toughness and strength. Yeah, it says here your toughness reduces the damage taken.
So like, let's say you have a decent toughness of like, I don't know, 4.
You're a good grizzled veteran.
Yeah, and then you have like a strength of 3. You have 5 wounds.
Well, technically only 1, but it effectively counts as that for taking damage. So essentially, the way it's going to work is you get into a melee fight and you slash and stab each other, but the guy isn't actually getting any good hits on you. But the first good hit that actually breaks the skin and cuts you good, you're down. But until then, you're good enough fighter that you're able to like maybe only get it on your arm or your leg, and you're able to like still keep on fighting.
Okay, I'm gonna have to read the roll to wound because I think you're trying to explain it, but this book is pretty good about it.
Yeah.
Once you hit a target test to see if a wound is inflicted, shot may fail to cause a wound because it hits part of the equipment, scratches the skin.
It just scratches or causes some very minor wound injury.
To determine whether your shot has caused a wound, compare the strength of the weapon. So, like, let's say your strength is, I don't know, about 4. You have a good sword. With a toughness of the target, let's say theirs is 3. The chart above shows the D6 score required. So let's say you rolled a 4 on your weapon strength against their toughness. You hit him, and he's down.
You need a 3 to deal the damage.
Okay, that makes a lot
more sense. A 3 or below. So essentially, if the guy rolled a 4, he gave a good swing, but you kind of backed off enough that he only like lightly cut you. He didn't deliver a good enough hit to put you down. That's what I was like trying to say. Is essentially.
Well, no, it's the other way where the weapon guy rolls and he gets a 4, then you're down. But if you got it like a 2, you're fine.
Yeah. Then there's critical hits though, which is when you roll a 6. Which is when These crits are nasty in Warhammer.
Hitting is unique in that you do want high for good.
Yeah.
A little bit confusing, I know, but it's kind of the thing done at the time, especially with AD&D being around.
Mm-hmm. The attack, Yes,
Thaco's the devil. I like 2nd edition fluff pieces, but Thaco is the devil.
Yep, and they have they thank God actually have the critical hit chart below critical hits, which I kind of wish more games did, because for some reason some of them like to relegate these tables in like the back.
Yep. So if you get 1 and 2 after you roll your 6, you hit the vital part. So you have 2 wounds, and you have to roll armor saves before doubling it.
Mm-hmm. The other part is
it's doubled again.
Yeah, but the armor is ignored.
Yeah, you can't save it, and then Master Striked.
You get it's doubled, and you just add a plus 2 to the damage regardless.
And there's a thing called injuries, which we're going to get to very soon.
Mm-hmm. And essentially, if a critical hit causes more than 1 wound, and the weapon of the attacking model is normally causes several wounds, then just use the one that does more damage. But of course, you're not going out there unless you're a flagellant. You're not going out there naked.
And that's what armor is. I mean, there's a few others that go naked, like goblins usually.
Or slayers, actually more accurately.
Slayers, definitely.
Because even goblins will probably wear light armor.
Eventually, when the orcs don't loot it from them.
Mm-hmm. And
so
these
they give you values. Light armor
gives you safe. Yeah.
You need a 6. Heavy armor, you need a 5. And Gromrel, good luck. That's the star metal stuff. Good luck finding it.
Dwarves might have some.
Yeah.
And of course, your shield. Then there's your shield, which just gives you a flat 1.
So, like, let's say I got a goblin swordsman for no reason other than I want a goblin swordsman. They'll probably have light armor and a shield, so I'd need a 5 if he got punched in the face by the Slayer.
Mm-hmm.
And if I got a 5, then he avoided the punch enough. But if not, well, that goblin's fucking dead.
Mm-hmm. And then it shows what the save modifier actually does. essentially reduces the strength need. It increases the strength needed to actually deal wounds.
And some armors are better at weapons are better at penetrating. Elven bows, for example.
Or a war pick.
So they give an example. Dieter wears heavy armor and carries a shield. So for him, he only needs a 4. He's hit by a crossbow, strength 4, and therefore his will save on a d6 roll of +5, 4 plus -1. Oh, because crossbows actually remove it a bit. They don't explain that too well. That's a little. We are skimming though, so it's not helpful.
Yeah, we haven't gone to weapons yet. I don't think we've gone to weapons yet.
Then there's injuries. Yeah. Here we go. This is what happens when
you're wounded.
Yeah.
We will once again roll 1d6.
Oh boy!
If you're lucky, you'll get knocked down. If you're not,
which means you
lucky,
can get back up recovery round. Which means you can get back up possibly on the turn rotation.
And if you're not so lucky, you're stunned, which
it's harder to get up from, but you're not out.
And then there's
5 and 6, you're gone.
You're dead. You're dead.
Well, you're not dead, but this character is essentially useless for the rest of the game. And they might survive, or they might die, or they might just show up with a horrible injury.
Likely died.
Basically, knockdown, they can get up next round. Stunned in 2, out of action. No.
Get out. Take them off the board. Take them off the board.
So close combat. Who can fight? Models whose bases are touching are engaged in hand-to-hand. So they're not fighting as long as they don't touch.
Mm-hmm. But who strikes first?
Yep, who strikes first. In order of descending initiative. If they're equal, you roll to see who goes first. And sometimes models will be allowed to strike first. This is usually because they either charge, which enhances your initiative a bit, or they have an equipment, skill, or spell that has the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And which models fight? It's just
as long as you're touching.
Yeah, as long as they're touching.
Which means you would have a wonderful, gangbang of 4 guys on one. As long as they're all touching.
I'm just envisioning the comedic image of a halfling who's about to sob on the floor. Because I don't know, something really stupid.
4 Dark Souls. 4 Dark Souls are all surrounding him with giant battle axes.
4 Dark Souls are surrounded with giant battle axe, giggling merrily, covered in the blood of his fellow archer.
Mm-hmm. If a warrior is touching more than one enemy, he gets to choose who he attacks, obviously. And if he has more than one attack, he can obviously hit more than one person.
Because you can get more than one attack. It's not as big a thing early on, but if your character doesn't die or get wounded too much,
then of course you're hitting, which is once again pull up the d6s on your attacks.
Yep, to hit your opponent's weapon skill versus your weapon skill.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the thing. You only got 1 wound, but you have to get through 2 things first. Their weapon skill and then their armor.
Mm-hmm. And then you've got to move on to the crazy bastards who dual wield.
And then they get an extra attack. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the
wield.
Yep. Weapon modifiers. They've got the weapon skill. They've got the weapon skill chart to show what you need to get through them. Essentially.
It is impossible to parry if it's a 6, though. Just letting you know.
Mm-hmm.
When you attack a stunned or knocked down warrior, they don't do they actually see where it kills them? Oh, put out of action. If you're on the floor and they hit you, you're out of action.
Yeah, because essentially, oof.
By the way, I love these weird bird things just looking. I think these are the Albatrosses. There's a little bit of lore knowledge. There's a albatross species on the planet that is worshipped by the god of oceans.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Routing.
And of course, you can also, most people are able to disengage and flee a battle, unless of course you're like a flagellant or a dark soul or essentially if you're a fucking crazy,
if you're
not
brainless or insane.
Or an orc.
Wow.
And
why would they
a warrior panics while fighting, they just start running.
Yeah, typically most warriors are, they're not most people are somewhat sane, and if they start realizing the situation is not going their way, they have to start making checks on their leadership to see if they start
And here we are, the route test.
they win.
There is a basic number. If a quarter or more of your warband's out of action, you start rolling. In a war, like for example, if you have like 8 guys and 2 of them are already out or running.
Yeah. It's also about damage relative to who you're dealing with, because, like, say for instance, you get into a fight and you're down 2 warriors before the other guy's out any. That's a lot more impactful to say you both take 2.
And if the leader's out, then you can't even use leadership. You're just fucked.
Yeah, you just gotta rely on your war bands, and even, let's put it this way, even guys like the Flagellants at a certain point will rout because I guess they kind of realize the way the wind's blowing.
Well, even they're not, like, even they have a minimal sense of survival.
Or at the very least, maybe they care enough about their comrades that they want to help them get away.
And you can choose to rout if you've already had to make the test. You can give up. You can give up the field if you don't. If you're like, screw this.
Because sometimes you got to live to fight, live another day. But then there's all alone, which is a bit different. It's essentially when you're outnumbered, there's no allies near you, and usually you're getting surrounded.
Yep.
Warriors, yeah.
If you're in that situation, you're gonna run.
Unless, as mentioned before, you're like a flagellant. Then you don't care.
Or you make our leadership roll.
And some units have fear, like as we mentioned, the undead, or typically some units.
Chaos guys do.
Yeah. The unit is charged by a warrior who has fear. If a warrior is charged by an enemy that he fears, you have to make a test to overcome that fear. And it's a leadership test, essentially.
And the other way too.
Yeah.
As for Frenzy, it's basically those Viking berserkers we mentioned. That's an example. Another one's actually witch hunters. Several witch hunter types can get this too.
Yeah, essentially they're always charging. They essentially, when these guys are not sane or smart tactical fighters, if they see an enemy, they're moving ahead to kill it. Yeah, give some bonuses.
Dwarven Slayers are this too.
Yeah, they get bonuses for it. They're typically better on the attack.
They're usually really good melee guys. Although warriors, if you're lucky and you play possessed, your guy can mutate, your crossbowman can mutate into becoming a frenzier.
Fun times for all.
And then there's hatred, which it's kind of like frenzy, but even more intense. It's pretty useful if you're fighting someone you hate. Warriors who fight an enemy they hate re-roll their misses.
This is most often seen with Dwarven Slayers, along with Frenzy. Dwarven Slayers often make their code because of a specific failing.
Or it also can be hilariously the result of an injury sometimes, because sometimes on the table you can essentially, let's say you got into a really bad fight with the Skaven, your witch hunter, and he lost an arm, the hand. But you don't deck him because he's still a good, swordsman. He comes into a Skaven, he might pick up the H to a Skaven and will essentially make a beeline for them and keep swinging until they're dead.
Yep, and then there's stupidity. Stupid tests are a thing. It's mostly for uncommanded zombies, but trolls also have to make stupid tests.
And rat ogres, yeah. Essentially, if they're big, they're dumb, they're stupid.
They're strong as an ox, but dumber than pig shit.
Stupid creatures, they have to make constant leadership rolls every turn. Unless they have essentially, quite literally, a retard regular.
You literally have to make a leadership roll every round, and if you match or go below, they're not reasonably intelligently. They'll just do what you tell them to. If they don't, they'll just stand there brainlessly. Well, actually, no. They give you examples. At 1 and 3, they'll move directly towards at half speed in a shambling manner. So they're going towards at least. But if you get the worst results, they literally are just so dumb. They're like the turkeys when they look up in the rain.
Typically, though, at the very least, as a slight thing because they don't as they think. If they're in combat at the moment, even a stupid creature typically realizes, I go kill.
The exception again being trolls.
Yeah.
If you're wondering, trolls are so dumb because of their regeneration, they still have to make the stupid checks.
Some are dumb enough to eat rocks.
I'm not fucking... Like, a rat ogre will fight, but a troll? Huh. Watch that. Wanders away with his back cut open. They do this!
Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned before, they were going to get into the weapons and stuff. As you mentioned before, crossbows, they didn't get into it yet, but now they do.
Yep, here we go. Here's the list. Oh wait, the fist. The truly desperate.
Yeah, you take a -1 to just any damage in general because, yeah. And enemies get more armor because, unsurprisingly, even a club is better at penetrating heavy armor than your fist.
But you can, as a big shitpost, and especially if they live long enough, make an orc specializing in Dwaya the Fist.
Mm-hmm.
Which is so cursed, but you can do it.
Mm-hmm. Daggers still aren't really good at penetrating armor, but you know what? They're still better than your fucking fist.
The trashiest of mobs usually have these.
Mm-hmm. Then there's your simple very simple blunt weapons. The hammer, the staff,
these are often given to low-tier trash guys, or mages
but
in the case of staffs and hammers.
They do get a special rule, concussion.
And hammers are actually pretty good.
Yeah. Essentially, when using one of these things, a roll of 2 or 4, you can actually stun your enemies, which can be quite good if you get them with this, which can be quite good. Yep. Then you've got your axes.
Axes are very commonly used by Empire mostly, but they're pretty good. Axe has a save modifier of -1, so a model with strength 4 using an axe has a -2 when they hit. Yeah,
because they cut. And swords you get to be able to parry with them because they're more fancy weapons that you can do more maneuvers with.
Yep, so swords are among the best because of that.
These are the kind of things. A sword is what you should give like a more elite unit or something you want to survive longer.
Unless you're a dummy and want to do the orc who knows Dwaya the Fist.
Mm-hmm. Then there are flails.
These ones are very often... Yeah, they're heavy. They're tiring to use, so there's a +2 strength bonus, only on the first round. They require 2 hands to use, so if you lose a hand, good fucking luck, buddy.
Mm-hmm. And obviously you can't use a shield.
Yep. They're great on the first hit, and that's about it.
Yeah, but 3 flagellants all charging the same guy will probably put that guy down.
Morning Stars are like that, but a little better.
Mm-hmm. You can actually use a shield.
They don't hit as hard, but you can use a shield.
And there are halberds. They're two-handed, but they can be really good at putting down big monsters and stuff like that.
Yep, and they actually allow you, I think because of the way their distancing work, they allow you to hit a little earlier than the other guys.
Mm-hmm. Then there are spears, I think we all know what a spear is.
They run
especially
the
gamut.
I don't know what a spear is.
I like how they explain it. They're sharpened stick. They can range from sharpened sticks used by goblins to actual cavalry spears.
Mm-hmm. First strike, they get rules strike first, essentially because it's got long range. You get essentially on any combat.
You're always stabbing first.
Yeah. They're unwieldy, which means you really can't. You can use it.
You can use a buckler, and that's about it.
You can't dual wield with these.
And if you're on a horse, they do more damage.
Mm-hmm.
And lances are even crazier. They do even more damage on a horse. But they can only be used on a horse.
Yeah, because duh. Then you've got your two-hander. You got your Zweihander.
Because, Empire.
And they've got the opposite rule. Strike last. You're not... Even when on a charge, you're not getting the first hit.
Yeah, but notice that their strength +2 at the users, they hit fucking hard.
Mm-hmm. And if a model is equipped with a shield, you can still equip a shield with these guys. You just can't use them.
And then there's Gromrel, again, star metal.
It's something you apply to a weapon. It's not the actual weapon.
It's like Mithril, and only dwarves really know how to use it, mainly because they get very angry whenever someone else is using it.
But if you're in Mordheim, you probably don't care what the dwarves think. In fact, you probably kill a dwarf. You have to get this.
Yep.
That's probably why the Slayer group you encountered is trying to kill you.
And then there are the
now,
Elven Weapons, which give you a bonus to initiative in hand-to-hand combat, which means that they're light. They're very nice light weapons.
Yep. And as for missiles, there's your standard short bows. Any bumbo can use them. Halflings
They don't
also
have much
use them.
range, but they don't have much range, but they also don't have much of a strength requirement.
There's no
bows are just flat out better.
Yeah, they hit farther. Longbows, they hit even farther. Elf bows are nasty because they actually hit so hard that your armor save goes up by 1 when they hit you with it.
And crossbows have a special rule move. They these days have a strength 4, so you actually need to be pretty strong to use them.
Mm-hmm.
But they have the special rule of move or fire, which is actually not good. You can only move or fire in your turn.
And here are slings. Slings can fire twice at half range, so they're actually a little nastier than you'd think.
Yeah, which is why for Skaven you can just get like a few of your hero units with slings and then just pelt the enemy to death. But then, speaking of Skaven, one of their unique weapons, because you really won't see this on anyone else, throwing stars.
Yeah. Only throwing stars. They're the only ones that can really use it. They're close range, but they don't suffer penalties for ranged.
Mm-hmm. Then you've got repeating crossbows, which aren't nearly as strength required as the regular crossbow.
They lose a little bit of range, but why on earth would you complain?
Fire twice. Mm-hmm. But you get a minus to hit on the second strike, but still, it's better than nothing. You get an extra hit.
That'll make the bad man think twice before approaching.
Then are the crossbow pistols, which you can dual wield.
Yeah, and this is actually a common witch hunter weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I love this art here. You can see this was a priest of Sigmar tortured to death by the cult of Possessed.
Mm-hmm.
And those are some Imperial soldiers on their little skull wall. Because, they worship some loser, but, you gotta venerate... You gotta venerate the war god, blood for the blood god.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, black powder. They're fairly recent in the setting. They've only been around for a couple hundred years.
Well, for the dwarf, and for the dwarves, that's a little too young for them.
Dwarves invented them a couple hundred years ago. They use them, but they're constantly talking about how it still needs time and development. And there's a faction that refused to use them.
Mm-hmm.
The Empire doesn't care; they use them, but they're not the most reliable.
Yep. And pistols hit hard, but they don't have a long range. Makes sense. And you have to spend an entire turn preparing to reload,
which makes them great for like a one-time opening thing and then swapping weapons.
Mm-hmm. But if you can do is if you have 2 pistols, you can fire one, fire the other, then drop them both and just run in screaming.
Yep, and then there's the dueling pistol, which has the same problem.
Yeah, that's the thing with gunpowders. Models wounded by a pistol take a -2 to their armor.
On top of that, I believe if you roll a 6 on your shooting, you literally have the gun explode in your hand.
Yeah, misfire is not great for them.
So blunderbusses are your big Elmer Fudd hunting shotgun.
You
see a bear with it. That's a Kislavite.
As it mentions, a blunderbuss is which can fire lead balls, rusty bolts, bent nails, or just scrap metal.
Thing is, though, they take so fucking long to reload. You can only use it once.
Yeah, so it literally says, I mean, theoretically you could try and reload it, but you'd be here all day and dead by the time you do, so just drop it.
Then there's another handgun. There's a variety of handguns.
Yeah, handgun is a bit misnomer. It's not. It's accurately called a rifle.
Yep.
These guys, you got to take a while to reload them, like I said, and you can only shoot remote, but they hit hard. Strength 4,
actually have
strength 4, range
for
24.
Gunpowder.
Yeah. Then there's the Hawkman long rifle, which are very rare, but obviously if you start from Hawkman, you can get some of these.
There's a chance you can get them, or you can loot them.
These guys have literally double the range of everything.
Yeah, they have the
And
best
you get
range.
the unique target. They get the unique skill, Pick Target. A model armed with the long rifle can target any enemy model, not just the closest.
So one of the goals, traditionally, if you use ranged units, is probably get a person who can use a Hotchland.
Mm-hmm. And then have them pick off that Magister who's standing in the back of the line casting a spell.
Especially if you're getting sick and tired of losing them because of spells. So besides that, here's armor. It's pretty simple. Light armor.
You know, yeah. And there's only and describe it to you. There's only you can't wear little bits. No, you're wearing light armor. You're wearing heavy armor, etc.
Oh, also, if you're wondering, this guy actually is a slight portend for. There's a faction we didn't cover in the book. Quite a few, actually.
Yeah.
He's part of a weird chaos group. We'll get into them.
But yeah, it goes over what we've gone over.
Oh no, there's a little bit on elves. They don't slow them down if they're armed with a shield, so you actually keep full movement if you have elf armor.
And they go over what bucklers are. And they go over shields and bucklers, which they've only lightly gone over.
Yep. Here's some equipment you can get: rope and hooks that allow you to improve movement on initiative tests when climbing.
And helmets.
Poisons and drugs. This is most often used by the rat things.
Or a scummy mercenary.
Or if you go crazy and do all goblin party, you can do that.
Get some night goblins.
Night goblins are night goblins are a weird type of goblin, by the way. They mostly prefer living in caves because they're very sensitive to sunlight, and they specialize in poison usage. That's also why they're kind of crazy because of that alchemy they do.
Mm-hmm. Then there are the more one-use items. Your lucky charm, which the first time a model with a lucky charm is hit in a battle, they roll the d6, and on a 4 and above, the hit is just discarded.
Yep.
Essentially, it's literally a get out of jail free card.
Yep. You can only use them once though.
Mm-hmm.
There's blessed water,
and only more than one doesn't matter.
There's blessed water, which mostly does damage on the undead, demons, or the possessed.
Then there are the elven cloaks, which
it helps with your dodging arrows.
Mm-hmm. Then there are unique arrows that you can get if you're for hunting arrows, because unique ammo types.
I love garlic here.
Yeah, garlic. Throw them at a vampire, and they have to do a leadership test.
So that's a great way to just troll a fucking vampire, a fucking undead group. You just huck garlic at them until the vampire.
Mm-hmm. Imagine having an item solely just to fuck with your faction. Just in this game. I mean, I get the the whole garlic vampire thing, but still.
Can't you envision some douchebag Skaven player just all armed with slings, just having garlic that they could fire at the vampire on purpose?
Mm-hmm. And then there are
I suppose you could.
That is something the Skaven would do.
Yeah. Speaking of Skaven weapons,
No, Biggie has something to say.
I suppose you could counteract it with mercenaries, but then again, what fucking mercenary would want a mercenary from the fucking Skaven?
That's a good. Well, Skaven, no, but undead, you could probably trick them.
And or maybe they can hire an inopportune ogre. But anyway, Nets once again for Skaven kind of is tactics. You can use them to entangle and keep enemies pinned.
So there's also Bugman Ale. It's super alcohol. It's a great way to avoid just fear.
It makes you so drunk you don't care anymore.
Elves, though, literally fucking drop dead if they drink it. Because elves, unlike in Tolkien, where they actually have stronger alcohol tolerance than dwarves, I'm not even kidding, elves drop dead at alcohol. They're actually surprisingly very frail against drugs.
Mm-hmm. And the thing about Bugman's Ale, you've got to buy it for the whole warband, and it gives the entire warband immune to fear. So if you guys remember, you don't typically know who you're going to be fighting off. At least your characters don't know who they're fighting off next. So if they drink all that ale and then they fight the undead, good on them. But if they felt like the Sisters of Sigmar, now they're just drunk and beating up nuns.
As you do. That's why you should always have a full serving of Bugman Ale.
Mm-hmm. Then there are tons of magic, which is pretty useful if you've got wizards. They get more spells.
Yep.
Simple enough.
There's the Holy
Then there are
Tome,
holy
which are
tomes,
given to
which
warrior priests.
Healing items, healing herbs. It helps you heal injuries.
The Holy or Unholy Relic, because Chaos does have them too.
And the undead.
Halfling cookbooks, which that's actually fun because it allows you to, it gives you an extra warrior.
Essentially, because the undead and the carnival cannot use this for obvious reasons.
Why not? Halfling cookbook sounds like something the carnival would cook. Come on, imagine deep fried butter. That's an actual carnival food.
It's because they already have enough food. They don't need more.
Oh yeah, I forgot they eat people.
And then there are animals you can get. Horses, for mounted and carrying stuff.
War
dogs, which depends on their faction, stuff like that.
Also, they never gain experience, by the way.
Yeah. Also, they die a lot easier because they only survive if they're ever taken out of action. They only survive on a 1 or a 2.
Poor pup.
Wait, my bad. I read that wrong. My bad. I actually read that wrong. They die on a 1 or a 2. They're actually more likely to survive.
Poor pup. Lanterns, obviously, pretty useful. Better black powder, which, it probably would help you not have your gun explode.
And it makes it just do more damage.
So you can also try to buy a Mordheim map, which they vary in quality.
Fakes essentially actually make it harder for you, but good maps can make it essentially to where you're actually allowed to re-roll where you're going to end up where you end up. It's
Vague actually isn't that bad. Catacombs are useful. Accurate is really good. And Master is amazing.
You choose the battlefield, which, as anyone knows, he who decides the battlefield decides the battle.
Cathay and Silk Cloak. Cathay is the China equivalent. It's very, very expensive and very amazing.
They get to reroll. Any mercenary warband whose leader is wearing one of these fancy cloaks can reroll their route tests.
Oh, and if you get killed, if the leader gets killed or taken out of action, it's fucked.
Then there are the Tears of Shayla, always something really
one of the gods. There's a lot of them. We're not getting into that.
God of Mercy, Goddess of Mercy, in healing.
Basically, the ripoff of Chalana Arroy.
Any model who drinks this is immune to poison.
Very useful, especially if you're fighting the rat things, but you don't know that necessarily. Here we go, magic. Look at it's Dumbledore's evil brother summoning a cat skeleton.
And it gives you a quick overview of what guys can use what. Chaos uses chaos. Warlocks use lesser magic. Skaven use Skaven magic.
Yep.
Warrior priests and the sisters use Sigmarite, a dogma, and necromancers use necromancy. Who would have thought?
Yep, because if you're wondering, this is lore-wise, there are the schools of magic that exist, but they are all illegal and banned in the Empire still.
Yeah, and considering the only people who would know the stuff would be elves, and there's no rules for elven wizards showing up in Mordheim, there's no actual... Yeah. You only got essentially, you've only got hedge wizard. If you're, the mercenaries, all you get is, you can buy a hedge wizard.
Which, that's not necessarily a bad buy. It's just, avoid the witch hunters, although they'll still kill you anyway.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to cast those big spells you remember from the tabletop.
So there's some allocated spells. Casting, it gives you damage. Here's the Prayers of Sigmar that give you the options here.
And for difficulty, the way difficulty works is you're going to be rolling 2d6s for this. And obviously, if you fail...
It don't work.
Also, wizards can't wear armor or shields, except warrior priests. Except warrior priests and sisters. They get armor.
Here's the necromancy list. Difficulty 10's pretty impressive, but then that's life stealing. Life stealing's pretty powerful.
Then there's chaos.
There's the Visions of Torment, which allows you to just utterly break their brains. That's what happened to me, actually, when I read Berlin by Night.
Yeah,
the growth. We got assaulted by spirits.
Then we have rat magic.
No, there's lesser magic first. Here's those. Oh, yeah. Anyway, that doesn't matter. Here's the rat magic. They can use Fireball.
And Shodan have the Horned Rat, which is difficulty auto. This spell must be used before the game and can only be used once. When cast, you summon D3 giant rats.
Yeah. Because why wouldn't you summon giant rats? It's just what you do.
Now, do they stalk at night and pray at night by any chance?
That's exactly
Yeah,
what
actually,
Skaven do.
Yeah, literally.
And the Great Horned Rat is the rat that makes all the rules. The big one.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a little break to see how chat's holding up with this glorious... it's pretty thick, but don't worry. We got through most of the hardest stuff, the crunch. We're going to get to how you form a warband. But let's see how you doing, chat.
May I suggest replacing GW with the ominous The Company?
The Company? Oh, yeah, like good old Way You.
Mm-hmm. Humans can only go 4 inches. I think I see they're growers and not showers.
Yeah. So this is D6 roll low or 2D6 roll low. Mostly, except for when you're doing damage.
Or magic.
Or magic. If you're doing leadership tests, magic, or if you're doing weapon tests. Or armor tests. And
it also puts it low as... It's like GURPS. Low is good, except when it's not.
Low is good, except when it's not. Yeah, basically it's like D&D, AD&D, you know, where consistency, what that? Dwarves can get Grom roll armor and weapons at character creation for something like 3 times the cost of the... Yeah, they can. Dwarves just are that good.
Oh, if you're rich.
Hammers ought to be good. They're in the name of the game. Yeah.
That sounds like it would either be a good idea or a bad idea.
After shooting the 2 pistols, and that's when I punch him, right? Yeah, that's when you punch him. You just punch him right in the fucking head. Anyway, let's get into creating a warband with, hey, it's the Fishmilk. He escaped from Vampire the Masquerade to say hi to us.
Oh, no.
It's the Fishmilk avian.
You're going to be subtracting money. You're always going to be able to
start
money
with
and
money.
stuff like that. Which is how you buy people. Because at the end of the day, all these days, regardless if they're fanatics, they have to be fed, so they have to be bought and have to have an income.
I'm just envisioning the paymaster saying, "You don't need food. You'll get food in the kingdom of Sigmar."
And now to steal a line from the Shadow of the Horned Rat, is not honor and Bugman ale enough for you? Honor and hangovers do not pay the innkeep.
So you start off with 500 gold crowns, which is quite impressive.
You're going to be blowing through that, though.
Yeah, because it costs money. So here's the level of things that you got. You have heroes, which are your good examples. They're armed and equipped individually. They have special equipment, and they might pick it up during the campaign. Leaders have to be a hero.
And you always need a leader. Like, you cannot send your warband into Mordheim without a leader.
You require a leader. They represent you, actually, the player, so you can make your Great Mary Sue OC before they get eaten alive by zombies.
Then there are the other heroes.
These are the other bumbos, and you can include up to 5 others, which form your warband.
Then there are the henchmen. These guys are...
disposable.
Yeah, but if they survive long enough, they can still earn experience.
Yeah, and they can actually even become heroes eventually, too.
You get to... and these guys come in more masked. As it says, they are brought into the game of 1 to 5 models.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, henchmen... Oh, they don't actually explain it, but I imagine if your henchmen last long enough, you could probably treat them like a hero and just kind of say
yeah, they can just be experienced enough. But then there are other types of henchmen. Typically the undead henchmen, like warhounds or zombies.
And
they don't get experience. The dog does not get any better at ripping up throats, and the literal mindless automaton does not get any better at hitting.
Oh, why does the doggo not get love?
Because it's been bred for this purpose its whole life. It can't get any better.
We need a more stronger
You also
doggo.
have to pay for their weapons and armor unless you want them to just go in starkers.
But you don't give your henchman the great magic sword, even if he's really good, because at the end of the day, he's just a henchman.
I'm just envisioning some douchebag paymaster just buying all of them with nothing and just find it in the buildings. Find your stuff in the buildings.
But at the very least, every unit begins. You recruit. They do start with a weapon.
No, for the henchmen, you just hire like random stick picking peasants.
Mm-hmm. Each
Go where
warrior
you
you
can get
recruit
profit.
can be armed with. Each warrior you can give them 2 weapons in addition to their free dagger. Everyone starts with a shiv, essentially, and 2 different types of missile weapons, as well as their armor. For instance, 2 pistols, as in 2 pistols, that counts as 1 missile weapon. Because essentially, if you're going to be using them in tandem.
Oh, by the way, for henchmen, this is the thing. Henchmen, they must be armored in the exact same way because they're faceless goons.
Mm-hmm. You can give them personalities and little things, especially if one lives for a while. But at the end of the day,
If
don't get
if
too
they
attached.
armed with a sword, all of them have to be.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually give
Warband.
you a warband roster sheet eventually. The warband's rating, the higher the rating, the better it is. And it's the number of warriors multiplied by 5, plus experience.
Mm-hmm. Large creatures such as Ragglers are worth 20 points, though.
Yep. As for ready to battle, let's go into this. Warbands.
Yeah, they give you some example of some of the. Well, they give you the things. Listen, me boy. There are many in Mordheim who you must face, from the men of Midheim to Marienburg. They stake their claim in this forsaken city. Then there be the Ratmen, the Walking Dead, and those crazed witch hunters. So I'm saying here, I'm feeling generous, boy. I would describe them all. Then maybe you have an idea of what you're up against. So pay attention, boy, while this information might save your life.
The possessed, the damned, the boogeymen. These scum are the worst of the worst. They are dangerous creatures, perhaps more so than any other group in the entire city. This chaos-worshipping scum consists of mutants, beastmen, and cultists, and even worse things called the possessed. If you ever let them get close to you, you'll be in big trouble. There are very few who are matched for this scum in close quarters. The restless dead plague Mordheim. Zombies, ghouls, and huge hellhounds prowl the streets, and woe to anyone who be caught by them. He'll be eaten alive or end up as one of the corpses himself. I lost my eyes to one of those fanged horrors who lead the undead. Let me tell you, that thing was not human. I put my sword through it and it still kept going.
Witch hunters would burn you and your warband if you give them the slightest reason. They are well armed and equipped, and show no mercy to anyone who dares in their way. They are followed everywhere in Mordheim by rabbles of lunatics and flagellants. One word from a witch hunter and they'll tear you apart, burn you, decapitate you, and excommunicate you from the grace of Sigmar. The Middenheim.
These northerners are nuts. Madmen, berserkers. They're as strong as ogres and meaner than orcs. Watch out for them in close quarters. The chances are they'll crush your skull with a hammer or behead you with one of those axes they carry with them.
Reichslanders, the finest of men, disciplined and magnificent archers of good and solid warriors. Reichlanders need the best leaders, so you best prepare to shape up, boy. For these warriors are good as the skill of their skill of war, and they are more than likely to hold their nerve than the others in Mordheim. I think you can tell where this guy's from.
Sisters of Sigmar. Don't believe everything those witch hunters say about the sisters. They're no more heretics than I am, and I'll skewer any man who says different. Not that the sisters need looking after. They're mean fighters, and you have to be tough just to live as they do in this big fortress in the middle of Mordheim.
These are no ordinary vermin. Big as a man, fast on their feet, and smart too. Not like common rats. The whole city's full of them, and worse of it is that they're waiting in the old drains and sewers, waiting for a chance to catch you on your own. Let them in, and you're a dead man.
The rich boys of Marienburg. Never turn your back on them. I'll grant them this. They're completely ruthless and have more money than anyone else. Hardly surprising, as those fat leeches in the Merchants Guild fill their coffers. That's why they have such good armor and weapons, usually a few more men than most. Don't let their fancy clothes and flashy jewelry fool you, though. They're not wearing those weapons for show. They know how to use them as well.
So there you have it. You'll encounter all these motley crews in Mordheim sooner or later. Each of them has their own weaknesses, but also its strengths that you have to learn to deal with. Remember, it is foolish to rush into close combat with the possessed. You'll only get killed. Neither should you try and outpace the Skaven vermin. They're as fast as Quicksilver. If you heed nothing else, lad, remember this. Make your warband as flexible as possible so that you are prepared for almost anything in this cursed city will throw at you.
And then we get into mercenaries, which, they go into details about this. This is during a civil war, so things are bad, and there's a lot of people, mostly men, plying their trade of murder, either because they deserted the armies of the three emperors, or they are bandits that just decided it'd be easier to get legal pay rather than robbing highways.
And typically, these mercenaries are going to be working for one of the emperors to get the warp stone because it's worth a lot of money.
Yep, and they're all throughout the Empire, and in some cases outside the Empire. They don't explain it here because they weren't introduced, but foreigners occasionally enter here too. Usually it'd be dogs of war, which are from there's the Italy equivalent called Tylea. These are actually where the Skaven come from.
Ogres
often like to, because they want food.
And a fight. They're not orcs, but they're down for a fight.
And occasionally you'll find others. There's the equivalent of the French, the Bretonians, and the Stallions, which are your Spanish. But it's mostly Empire and occasionally Tylians.
They have rules depending on where your mercenaries are coming from. Reichland is the kind of the posh, like they're the traditional capital of the Empire, so they're more well off.
The best way to describe it is early. The Empire is kind of like, in a little bit of ways, like the early Holy Roman Empire. So their main capital is actually more like in the equivalent of Aachen. So it's kind of in the west.
And
this is where Reichland is.
And they are very proud of their service to the Empire, and more than anyone else, they are soldiers. They're not Middenheimer, where where Middenheimer are full of warriors, Reichland is full of soldiers.
They are kind of not quite Prussian, that's Hochland, but they're your kind of equivalent of the Ultramarines in a way. They're kind of your poster boy for an Imperial soldier.
And in fact,
they're known for having the best cavalry out of all of the Empire.
And they actually have some rules regarding to their discipline. They're known for their big things about officers. So essentially,
they're less likely to break.
12, not 6.
They're less likely to break, and on top of that,
their marksmen are just better.
Their marksmen are overall better. They're known for their marksmen almost as much as Hochland. And they actually are known for cavalry, but you don't see it here.
Yeah, because it's kind of hard to use cavalry in mean streets.
What are you talking about? I can ride my horse through the streets. Oh no, I fell in a pothole and I'm getting my kidneys gnawed off by a rat.
Middenheimers, they aren't typically Sigmarite. They're Ulrichian.
Okay, so let's go a little bit into religion slightly. So the Empire has a pantheon, and there's actually a couple of pantheons in the Old World. For the Empire, it's a fusion of the original northern ones they worshipped and a few of the new gods, or a few of the southern gods, a few of the northern, and some new ones. Sigmar's the newest of them and the most relevant.
He is the patron. He is the patron god.
The original god they primarily worshipped was one called Ulrich, who was the equivalent of Thor and Odin. Mainly Thor. He was their warrior god.
And then he got the shaft.
Well, what happened was Sigmar worship massively expanded throughout the Empire, but there's quite a few that still worship Ulrich, and it's kind of a slight nod to the Protestant Reformation. Kind of. Essentially, Middenheim and a lot of more northern parts of the Empire still worship Ulrich more than they do
Middenheim, if we're going with the HRE symbol, is Saxony.
Yep. And they still worship Middenheim. They still venerate war, and that's why where Reichland is a nation of soldiers, Middenheim's where you get your warriors from. You need
and
a
to
dude
show
with
that
a big
off, their
fuck-off
champions,
sword. You hire a Middenheimer.
Their champions, their elite units start with 4 strength instead of 3, so their elites hit harder.
And you're not as likely to be able to take those armor hits.
Marienburg, they are the Dutch.
They're the equivalent of the Hanseatic League / Dutch, yes. Their main god is actually, it's interesting. It's because there's lesser gods. We mentioned too. Marienburg tends to worship the god of the sea because they make most of their money from the sea. Manan,
they're also scumbags. There are also scumbags that typically, even when they're a part of the Empire, don't typically like to help it.
Marienburg is a part of the Empire, but eventually what happens is the Guild of Nobles, the Guild of Merchants of Marienburg, bribed an emperor who is known for being very, very greedy to essentially be ruled as its own state. And the emperor just okayed that because that's a lot of money. I don't know if it's the same emperor that gave the Halflings their homeland. I don't think it was.
Irregardless, they were both bad.
Both of them were dumbish decisions. It's just the Halfling one was less bad.
Mm-hmm. Irregardless, they have their own stake in the Civil War, and they send their men to Mordheim.
I think it's because one of the Emperor promised to give them like more autonomy or like more control over the northern trade routes.
They have a claimant. It's more that they have a claimant, as it says in the fluff here. They get the special role trader. Essentially, whenever they're looking to find rare items from the merchants nearby, they always get a +1 to see if any good stuff comes in. And because Marienburg is a wealthy state, they get 100 extra crowns at the start.
Which actually is better than you think. That actually can stretch it more than you think.
20%, yeah, it's a 20% bonus. And in a one-off game, they are permitted to 20% extra crowns when recruiting their warband, period. For example, if you're starting a big, 1,000 gold game, they get 1,200.
So, yeah, that's the thing with Marienburg. They can afford better units from the start. And
better units and more units.
And on top of that, they're more likely because in other Fantasy Flight games, they have what's called a requisition system, and items have a certain amount of rareness to them. They treat it as one level below. So, like legendary status, let's just go. I'll make it up. There's common, uncommon, rare, very rare, and then legendary. A legendary weapon to a Marienburger is only very rare. Uncommon is treated as common to them.
Mm-hmm. And this is describing what your unit layout is going to be for any of the human mercenaries.
Yep, you need a captain. That's your leader. Your champions are your heroes. 2 of your heroes.
Youngbloods, they're essentially they're soldiers with a lot of potential.
They're your third in commands, basically.
Mm-hmm. They're still they're still a hero unit, whereas your warriors, marksmen, and swordmen are your henchmen.
Yeah, essentially, captain would be, the rank. Champions would be your first LTs, and your Youngbloods the second LTs. Then you got your mooks.
Mm-hmm. There's the guys at the front with the swords, and then there's the guys with the bows and guns.
So here's the experience, and here are the skills table they get, and they're different based on which ones.
Mm-hmm.
Captains are always the same, but champions vary. As does the Youngbloods.
Also, the experience. Captains begin with 20, champions begin with 8. Youngbloods, as like I said, they're Youngbloods. They get no experience, and neither do your henchmen.
So, for example, for Reichland, champions know combat, shooting, and have strength. And Youngbloods have speed instead of strength. While with Middenheim, they're all on strength and speed in combat, but not shooting. And Marienburg, kind of combat, shooting, and speed. That essentially gives them the emphasis. That's where they focus on traditionally.
They're swarm. Marienburg swarms. Middenheim smashes. Reichland shoots.
Shoots and smashes, technically.
Yeah. Well, it's more like they have to take a meme from the High Elves, a staunch line of spears.
So, mercenary equipment list. Here's how much each item costs for just their weapons, missiles, armor. And
because your GM might allow you, say, if you kill a Skaven and you get their Weeping Blades, they might say, fine, whatever, you can use it next thing, but officially, this is what they're allowed to use.
Like, they're not gonna be armed with fucking Gromril sword.
Well, they might steal it off of a dwarf, but you're not
steal it off a dwarf or maybe an orc that had it, yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And as I was saying, some weapons are just they're not going to be proficient in. Like, your marksman is not going to be able to use throwing stars.
Until you put experience into them knowing how.
Maybe not even then, because why use that when I have a gun?
Because, like the orc who I made with the Way of Defist, it must be done.
And then they actually, the official, what the official stats are. Yeah.
for your
Yep.
first level bum.
Oh, and costs.
Captains cost a lot. They cost 60%. They cost 60 gold.
And you
which
have
is
to
like,
buy one. You have to buy one, so
you're already
that's
down.
automatically.
You're already down 12%. Or if you're Marienburg, 10.
But they're good.
They're needed, and they're your best unit, hands down. They move
Mm-hmm.
They move averagely, but they have good weapon skill and ballistics. Their strength is solid.
And high leadership.
Toughness is solid. Wounds starting. Decent initiative, one attack, but their leadership's high. You need them. And they're a good start.
Yeah, and obviously, barring the Reichland, which doubles it, they all have a leadership pip radius of 6 inches.
Yep. Champions. These are your
which as it says here, means that they can let you the units in that radius use the leader's leadership, not their own. So if you have bad leadership units, like if they're being scared and intimidated, like let's say a line of zombies is charging theirs, as long as the captain's near, your swordsmen don't have to use their leadership; they get to use their captains.
And that's why Reichland is a lot more powerful than you think, despite the bias.
Mm-hmm.
Marienburg's nice, but having that extra leadership, very good.
Double the range, which means you can make a more spread out battle line.
What are there any downsides?
For Reichland?
Yes.
They don't hit as hard overall, and unlike Marienburg, they don't start with as good equipment.
But they have the best marksman, hands down.
They have the better marksman, and they're more flexible. They're the most tactically flexible. That's why I compared them to the Ultramarines.
Then there are the champions. These guys are they're the guy that drinks and boasts and but he can back it up. He's the best of the warband.
Your weapon thanes, your berserkers, great swordsmen,
your veterans,
great gunmen.
The veterans. Yeah, these are the veterans.
These would be your sergeants at arms.
These guys are the ones who are going to be doing the challenges if you have any of them, and they get their pick of the loot.
Yep, and
no special rules about them though. No special rules though.
Yep, they're a little bit worse than the captain, but not by much.
Then they're the Youngbloods. They're cheaper than champions, but they're not as good, funnily enough.
But these Youngbloods are basically a cut above your average rabble. To give you an idea, champions and Youngbloods usually are noblemen or mercantile scions or priesthood guys. They're higher than your average, shit-eating peasant.
Funnily enough, if you actually look at the stats, they're actually worse than swordsmen. It's just the unique thing about them is that because they're hero units, they can be outfitted with what you find. So they're more able to level up. Yeah, they're more able to level up.
And marksmen are also better than them. Again, Youngbloods they're needed hero units, and they're not great, but they're useful, and you can you can arm them as you wish.
Then you've got your henchmen. These guys come in 1 and 5.
You've got your basic
warriors.
Basic bitch.
Yeah, they're similar to swordsmen, except with warriors, maybe you should fit them out with obviously swordsmen. You should be using swords, so maybe give your warriors like halberds.
Warriors can equip whatever. Yeah. Marksmen require a ranged weapon, and they're pretty decent at that role. Swordsmen, you give them swords. That's why they're more expensive. And there's special rules for them too. So anyway, that's your swordsman. Yep, yeah. And that's your mercenary bands. Ah, yes, the Cult of the Possessed. These are your homegrown group.
Yeah, these guys. They have
chaos groups. These are the homegrown boys.
But the thing about the Cult of Possessed is, you see, Chaos has these wonderful creatures called demons, and in places like Mordheim, where the Veil of Reality has been weakened, they can come into the world. Places. Yeah, they can come into the world. The Cult of the Possessed, they take it one step further. They open up the rifts and then put demons inside their own bodies. Most people just die. Most people who survived aren't able to hold it for long, and they become the Dark Souls, which we'll get into what they are later.
So what happened was, when the meteor slammed, a lot of people died, and a lot of people were spontaneously mutated because of magic radiation.
Some just went insane.
Some went crazy. And what happened was a leader kind of cropped out of this insane batch who became known as the Dark Emperor. They follow him, and essentially he's treated as a high priest or avatar of the demon they worship, which they're trying to create as like a fifth chaos god in a way.
These guys have magic and mutants, and those mutants are nasty, and that magic is nasty.
So here's your choice of warriors. You can Magister. These are your captains because
they're also your casters.
Because this cult splintered from Tzeentch, the trickster god, who specializes
the possessed.
in magic.
Possessed, these are, as I said, the fitting things. These guys are demon hosts, essentially.
Those are the ones that willingly survived the possession. Mutants are those who just got warped.
Dark Souls are failed hosts, but they and now they're scarred, and now they're mentally scarred.
Mentally scarred or literally mindless. I aim you at weapon.
Mm-hmm. Brethren, they're just cultists.
They
want power. They want power, but they're not. But they haven't. But they didn't do what the Dark Souls did.
And then, last but not least, you can hire Beastmen. The Gores are the goat ones. They're the lower class ones.
They gave them still experience. Magisters begin with 20. Possessed have 8. Mutants have nothing. Everyone begins with nothing.
Fittingly enough, the Magister has academic, speed, and combat. Not so much strength and shooting. Fair enough. Possessed have strength, speed, and combat, and mutants have combat and speed.
They're not strong, but they can mutate.
And here's what their equipments are. Notice it's not as good as the mercenaries.
Yeah, because they're not. These guys aren't professional soldiers.
Not only that, but they're natives to the city that just got meteored.
Mm-hmm. Don't let the fact that as I associate like the Dark Souls specifically, Dark Souls and Beastmen, no missile weapons.
I was just gonna. Well, you're skipping ahead. I was gonna read when you're facing an enemy that's really scary, like the Living Dead.
Oh no! It's right above that. It's right above it. It's right above it. They have a thing says Dark Souls equipment list. List is only for Dark Souls and Beastmen only.
Yeah, none. Sorry about that. I can't read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I told you the first time.
When you're facing an enemy that is really scary, like the Living Dead or Chaos, shoot them. Don't attack in close combat if you don't have the option.
Not wrong.
Yeah, these guys are a pretty good melee race. Faction. Magister's 70 gold. They're worth it because they're not just your leader.
But they're worth it because they have access to magic, which it'll either utterly change the scenario for you in the fight, or utterly fuck you. And that's an example. Here's an example of what magic can do. There's a demon bursting out of this man's face.
Speaking of demons, the possessed.
Yep,
these guys are even more expensive than your leader, but they have committed the worst heresy, becoming hosts to demons.
They literally sacrifice their being to be fused to them.
Mm-hmm. And 90, as it says, their cost is also dependent on the mutations because they can begin with mutations, which can have drastic effects on how you use them.
Yep.
And as it Zeros here, they are pure melee. Don't even try to use them. But look at that stat line: 5 movement,
which
full weapon
first
skill,
one
4
we've seen
strength,
over that. Yeah.
4 toughness, 4 two not the best. Yes,
no, that's wounds, dude. That's really good.
Oh, yeah, wounds. Yeah, they have the highest wounds we've seen so far.
And
pretty high
strength than normal too.
High initiative, and 2 attacks,
which is the first we've also seen.
Leadership. And 7 leadership.
I think that's also the first we've seen 2 attacks.
They also cause fear. Mm-hmm. They also cause fear.
Yeah, that's the first time we've seen 2 attacks actually.
Mm-hmm. Then we've got mutants. These guys are a lot cheaper than possessed and do mutate and still get mutations. They're just flat, not as good as the possessed though.
Yeah, and actually their quality varies depending on what you roll mutation wise.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's also another thing about possessed. They don't use weapons or armor. They don't need it. Their bare hands are enough to. Let's put it this way: they're unlike all the other guys. Their fists aren't the shitty little things that plump, that click. Their fists tear through armor.
Yeah, because it's made of warp. It's made of magic. They're literally made of magic.
Well, the flesh isn't, but the demon inside doesn't care.
Yeah, it just pumps magic into it.
Dark Souls are insane, and because of that, their bodies are scarred, and so are their minds.
Yeah, and they're absolutely mad. They're treated as holy men, and in a way, they're like witch hunters, only completely unreasonable, rather than almost completely.
Mm-hmm. They don't have bad. They don't get bad stats, but their unique role is crazed. They know no fear. They automatically pass any leadership test.
Which is actually very useful.
Which means you can send these. Which means, unlike say, also that should be mentioned for creatures that cause fear or are immune to fear. That it's not like it's one of those weird things to where essentially like a possessed demon doesn't fucking care about zombies.
Yep, and Brethren are your just average cultists. Notice that they're still better than the Youngbloods.
Yeah, and they get to use ranged weapons, which is primarily what you'll be using them for, because the Dark Souls are your melee troops.
You'll note that you have to kind of use probably more Brethren than you'd like to start with. Because, again, the Possessed is very expensive, and you are required, I think, to have one.
Mm-hmm. Then they're the Beastmen.
Oh, no, let me look. Oh, no, you don't need a Possessed. So you do need a Magister, but you don't need a Possessed. So that's good.
You don't? Yeah. Beastmen,
powerful, but
these
still.
guys are, they actually start with 2 wounds.
Beastmen are, if you're wondering, they're the animal dudes that we mentioned. They're resistant to pain. The destruction of Mordheim brought quite a few to them because, well, that's a big win for the Beastmen. They absolutely hate civilization.
Civilization go poop.
I poop in the streets to protest your civilization. Return to
anyway,
monkey.
Here are mutations. These are what you can get, what you can purchase on character creation, but sometimes you'll be getting that. You might be able to get them later on, and you won't be that the DM gets to decide what the fuck you get.
And sometimes you get something fairly decent, like Demon Soul.
Demon Soul, +4 to if you get to give these to your mutants or possessed. +4 against any save regarding spells.
That's really powerful because magic's very strong.
Great call. Freckard, you should give at least 1 melee mutation to your possessed since they do start with only fists.
And a Great Claw's not a bad one. You can't carry weapons in the arm, but you gain an extra attack in hand-to-hand with
if you're possessed. Well, if you're possessed, you don't have an attack. You don't have weapons.
Yeah.
Cloven feet, more movement, never hurts. Tentacles,
also not bad.
You can grapple, reducing their opponent, reducing their attacks, which down to 0.
You have Corrosive Blood, that's an option. Spines, Scorpion Tail. Extra Arm, which can be useful.
Yeah, gives you an extra attack.
Hideous,
also, you can just have a shield on it. Yeah.
Honestly, your mutations, there's better and worse, but there's no actually bad one.
Mm-hmm. But though, there's just some things that can be just a bit. Well, for instance, Great Claw. Like I said, when your mutant was using, you can't. If you want a mutant to use a shield, don't give him a Great Claw in his left arm.
Yeah.
But yeah, unlike say Warhammer,
give him an extra arm.
Yeah. Yeah. For using, for instance, just an example of using like Warhammer roleplay. It doesn't there's no social stage here. It doesn't. The only people you're going to be interacting with are your fellow Chaos Whisperers. They don't care how mutated you are.
And they see you as favored by favored by the Dark Emperor.
Yeah, you're blessed. Then they're the Witch Hunters, the people who despise them possibly the most.
In this case, they're the Order of Templars of Sigmar. There's other witch hunting groups. Some of them serve the Lords of Order.
They're typically not in the Empire.
Other gods. They're typically in the Empire.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Lords of Order, they typically like the Southern Realms.
Yeah, you'll usually see them in the South.
Then we've got, in their war bands, you've got the Captain, Warrior Priest.
Witch Hunter Captain, a Warrior Priest. You may include one. You don't have to.
Yeah, these are what you can get. With your other Witch Hunters, your junior Witch Hunters.
Yeah, your standard Witch Hunters, then Zealots. Yeah.
Flagellants and Doggos.
They include pups.
Unlike all the rest of them, Warrior Priests, and failing because they're a caster, they get more experience to start with.
And here's their weapon lineup.
Witch Hunter Captain can be anything you want to be. Because they're good at everything.
Witch Hunters are very flexible, too.
Mm-hmm.
Warrior Priest, not so much, but still very flexible.
They smash.
No, you can do Academic.
No, but I'm saying, like, their primary combat role is smash.
So, you got your Hunter equipment list here. Flagellants literally can only equip these 3 weapons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they're crazy.
And the Zealots, they can equip a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be your Zealots. Essentially, the Witch Hunters are a bit odd in that their champions, barring the Warrior Priests, are actually probably more best used at ranged. Because your Zealots don't get access to black powder weaponry, while your Witch Hunters do.
On top of that, captains have a pretty solid ballistic skill, and Witch Hunters do too. So it's not a bad idea to either get a couple of pistols, or a crossbow pistols instead, if you want to make sure you reload a little more often, and just send them in that way. Because, and you can even pair them off with a few Zealots too to help out there. But your Zealots and your Warrior Priest are your line. And if you want hilarity, you can just send a horde of flagellants, which is funny.
Yeah. Speaking of zealotry, let's move on to what these guys can actually do in a combat.
So Witch Hunter captains have the same leader stat, but they also have Burn the Witch, which gains hatred on all models who can cast spells, because magic is banned in the Empire.
And the regular Witch Hunters get that too.
Same.
Warrior Priests don't get that rule, but they get magic, or no, my bad, prayers to Sigmar.
It's one of the ways they escape being burned.
You can only have one of these in a warband, though.
Still very useful.
And Flagellants.
They're trash, but they're fun.
They are the equivalent of Dark Souls, actually, except they can't wear armor. They are the answer to the Dark Souls.
And they're worse. I mean, they're dangerous up front. You notice that they can move pretty quick, and they have pretty good strength and weapon skill. I don't know why they have ballistic skill, that they shouldn't.
It's probably, essentially since they don't have access to it, it's probably just one of those, they just didn't think about it.
Or maybe, think about it, a flagellant that dual wields crossbows that they then shoot themselves in the foot to repent after doing it.
I'm pretty sure they've done that before.
Zealots are trash, but they're useful.
These guys actually, they're just sad. They've literally lost everything, and so they're just kind of coming here to repent and die. Except they're just not flagellants.
Well, it's not everyone losing everything. It can also be examples of those who have utterly turned to religion. Essentially, they gave up their former lives to just become a part of the mob.
Yeah, there's nothing special about them, essentially.
And last but not least, War Doggos. They're the cheapest of all, but that's because they don't improve ever.
Also, they got movement 6, so
they're really fast. They're pretty strong. It's not bad to bring one of them with you early on.
Then there are the Sisters. This is actually a bit of their lore. Essentially, they were a convent. They were just a convent of nuns at first.
Yep, they actually were. There was a bunch of nun orders for Sigmar, and one of them was the Order of Merciful Sisters.
But their popularity, because these girls, my bad, were they were well known for being friends of the people. They did healing, they did charity, which kind of put them at odds from the established religion which gets more removed sometimes.
Well, there's also the fact that they also have the ability to do augury, and because of their effective at healing, they started getting tainted with the brush of maybe they're using magic to do this.
The fact that
they're literal witches.
Yeah, the fact that they are women and that the warrior priests never got this stigma should tell you something.
So what happened was, because they could do things like auguries and heal, the common people love them, but witch hunters began to see them as witches because, well, they're able to see the future. Fucking magic, man.
Remember, hatred, burn the witch. That applies to these girls too, because they're just magic. They are, because as the rulebook puts it, even Sigmar things is still magic.
Many of Sigmar's priests wish to ban them too, because they claim women have no right to teach the holy word of Sigmar.
Told you. And the fact that to the witch hunters, the fact that Mordheim got blown up by a giant meteorite proves they were right. These were witches all along, which gives them full justification to kill them horribly.
Well, not only that, but out of all the inhabitants, because they're slightly able to see the future, they actually saw the meteor coming a little bit beforehand, so they were able to get a little bit of stuff prepared, at least enough to survive the worst of it.
These guys are, I guess you could put it, the most goody of all the good aligned factions, in the sense that their literal goal is to restore, like, unlike the mercenaries who just want money, the witch hunters, which are just screaming and raving, they actually want to fix the city. Obviously, as the history will show us, they fucking fail, but, you know.
So, yeah, let's actually get into it. Canonically, they were slaughtered to a man by Sigmarite priests,
woman,
witch hunters, and, you know, every other faction. And Mordheim was actually just plowed apart and destroyed.
Yeah,
because
in this setting, trying to do the right thing makes everyone real. Doesn't earn you friends.
While not as grimderp as 40k, it can get grimderp, and Sisters of Sigmar are an example of it.
Yeah, well, it's essentially, you know, trying to be the best and not looking out for your own self-interest kind of earn them a lot of enemies. But yeah, but jokes aside, they're a really good warband.
Yep, you have to include a matriarch because each order or convent has one. Sister Superiors are your kind of second in commands, plus your
Ogres.
That's your future.
Yeah. They're blind, yeah, but they don't need it. Novices, and then just sisters.
So they have some special skills like the Sign of Sigmar. They have
which means
of
that
Sigmar.
Possessed, you know, which means the unholy essentially lose their attacks.
Yep, utter determination, righteous fury, and absolute faith. They have a variety of bonuses instead of the standard.
Yeah, as you know, none of their heroes are good at shooting.
Yep, they have slings, and that's about it. They are you'll see that they're very much a melee only, though they do have some minor ability.
Well, they don't need range when they have miracles.
So the matriarch, overall, pretty darn solid. They get leader and prayer Sigmar.
And as they note here, you're not paying for them; you're giving a dowry to the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually like that it's a little bit of fluff.
Oh yeah, it's really cute. Like you don't usually see that in books anymore. So Sister Superiors are a long-serving priestess. They're well versed in that. They also can use. They just have weapons and armor.
Well, but they have Prayer Sigmar. They access the Sigmarite magic.
Oh, they also can too?
Yeah, Sigmarite Matriarch, Special Rules Leader, Prayer Sigmar. No,
I meant the Sister Superior.
No, they don't. Just you didn't go over the Matriarch, their prayers yet.
I skimmed over it slightly.
Okay, and then the Augurs, they're the
ones that can see the future. Basically,
they
they're
don't
blind.
Get magic, yeah. Blessed Sight. They reroll any failed characteristic test, resisting spells, climbing, any other reason, and any rolls to hit in close combat they can or shooting. But I mean, why would you give your augur a sling? But you can re-level it.
On top of that, this is the more important thing. They actually, because their main objective is to collect the word stone, they're more. They can actually be more likely to find it. If the augur's not put out of action, you can explore and you pick the either dice as the result to find it.
Then there are your regular sisters.
Yeah, they're just solid. They're pretty good. And then the
novices. They're even worse, but they're cheaper.
Yep.
Not really much to say.
They only take women, so.
And they get special weapons because they were able to get their stuff. They get Sigmar Warhammers, which, I mean, theoretically, I guess you could also give to your warrior priests, but...
Yep, and these Warhammers are actually similar to Galmaraz. They have close combat as user +1, concussion, and holy.
Holy weapons. Each of these has been blessed. They get a +1 to all wound rolls against possessed and undead models, which possessed specifically only means the possessed unit, not the entire faction.
Yeah. Still good, though, since possessed are strong.
Note that you will need to score a 6 before any modifiers in order to cause a critical hit still, though, obviously. Matriarchs and Sister Superiors can dual wield these things.
Hilarious.
But why?
They also get steel whips. Non-parryable, so they actually can bypass swords. That's actually really powerful.
And whip crack. When the wielder charges, they get a +1. They get an extra attack.
Yeah, you can kind of see why these were fairly strong, and I can imagine the company may have actually gotten rid of them on purpose.
Just a little.
Probably to avoid the, oh yeah, we didn't rip these off for the sororitas.
Yeah, jokes aside, as I mentioned before,
They're one of the strongest.
They have one of the worst range games, even worse than the Possessed.
And that's not good because ranged comes before. So if you have pretty good armed guys, you can rip them apart like tissue paper.
Mind you, all that heavy armor will mitigate the bleeding.
Yeah. So anyway, the dead,
Undead.
the undead.
Ruled by Vlad and his wife Isabella, they rule Sylvania, but they've been keeping a pretty good lid on the whole fact that a province of the Empire is essentially turned into an undead state.
Well, yeah, especially, and actually, on top of that, the peasants adore them, not because they're mind controlled by evil vampires or anything. No, it's just the guys. Like, here's a little bit of lore. The previous guys that led Sylvania were so fucking incompetent
and evil.
Even the immortal, unholy vampire who literally is an unfeeling monster
and drinks them.
Even they're seen as massively improved and heroic to the Sylvanian people.
And essentially why the undead are in Mordheim is Vlad is preparing his big plan to invade the Empire with an undead army. But
essentially he's about to throw his ring in. He's about to become the fourth emperor claimant.
Yeah, but while your average necromancer can raise maybe a handful of zombies on their own, there's a limit to how many he can gather necromancers. So he needs Wyrdstone to gather the huge armies he's going to need.
And he has a good amount because Sylvania, there's a reason why besides they wanted to do Transylvania. It has warpstone in its soil. Basically, a meteor shower slammed into that part of the Empire long ago.
But, of course, more never hurts, especially since Wyrdstone is more powerful.
And on top of that, he still needs more because these duels between the three emperors are a lot more... he has a good army, for undead. But he's going to need to raise more, and that costs warpstone, and he's going to run out otherwise.
And for the night belongs to the undead, and Mordheim is always at night, which is actually a fact. There is no day in Mordheim anymore.
Mainly because that's the effect of the meteor's damage to reality.
Yeah, which is also the lore reason why you can have your vampires out at any time.
Otherwise it'd be funny if... Son!
Yeah. Vampires, obviously, you need one. You don't need a necromancer.
Vampire, but a necromancer's not mandatory.
You can get up to 3 dregs. You can quote as many number of zombies.
Because
any number
they're trash.
Of zombies. Ghouls and
which are also trash. Actually, ghouls are fun. We'll get into them. And dire pups. So.
In experience, only your necromancer and vampire start with experience. No one else did, and your henchmen can't gain any.
Yep. So vampires gain pretty flexible. They just can't shoot well.
The fact that they can't shoot, though.
Yep. So here's some undead equipment list. These are used by undead warbands. It's not a bad selection. It's just they're brainless.
Yeah. But yeah, the undead, they don't really get many great things.
And here's a bit of fluff. All who profit from the spoils of chaos shall be doomed, so quoth Grand Theonogonist Vilgrim III, Marius said vehemently. I am not a looter or a thief. It's been 3 weeks now, Marius, Hensel argued bitterly. We've run out of money. We need more men. We need new weapons. For Sigmar's sake, Marius, we'll all starve. Hensel paused for a moment, and a sly look entered his dark brown eyes. That broken vault is there, and someone will find it. Others less righteous than us will be looking for it. Would you see the wealth of the Empire stolen by wicked creatures or men of no mortal virtue? At least we'll be spending it to further our cause.
Oh, dear God, please, I'm starving.
As the two
spoke. Just to explain, this is once again to explain, why do I need to pay my zealots or flagellants? Because they need to eat.
Yep, as the two spoke, Enderlin, one of Leipzig's men, came around the corner, clearly excited. We found the merchant's house. The vault's there, all right, he told them with a grin. We'd better be quick and grab the hoard before there's any trouble. And with that, he hurried off again, the witch hunter and Hensel following. Enderlin led them down the narrow hallway, blah, blah, blah. From the end of the alley opened to a wider street. Skeleton hung from the giblets, rusted metal creaking as the cadaver swung. Corner of a nearby building had broken through its foundations. When the dark confine and exposed cellar, gold glinted in the dim light. "We'll be taking that," a voice called out, and from the shadow stepped a dozen men, some carrying crossbows and others wielding swords and spears. They were all well dressed in the manner of Marienburgers.
"Dare not oppose me," cried Marius, pulling forth his blade. "I am sent here by Sigmar himself. Cross my blade in front of me and damn the world around us in turmoil. Chaos gnaws upon the bones of our lands. Blah, blah, foul creatures, blah, blah, blah." That's all they hear. "All the same, the gold is ours," their leader replies, signaling his men to advance.
Oh,
And so be it.
I like
You shall
he's
be in the
barely
young
hiding his greed. That's
nation.
hilarious. It's hilarious. He's barely hiding his greed.
Yeah.
Essentially, this is a great example of how an encounter can form. Because when you do campaigns, you actually are just randomly rifling through the city unless you have a decent map. And this is an example of what can happen. In this case, let's say player 1 is the Witch Hunters, and I guess he's playing the main captain as a complete fucking idiot.
And they've got to the vault, but now the Marienburgers have essentially ambushed them and surrounded them.
And they're fucked. So, okay, undead. Vampires are, you'll notice something. They're the most expensive captain unit we've seen so far.
Look at that stat line. They move as fast.
They're the fastest units we've seen yet. They attack twice, 2 wounds.
Well, no, they're as fast as war dogs.
They're as fast as war dogs, and they have
4s
2
and
attacks.
everything. Yeah, 2 wounds, 5 int, which means theoretically, they don't, but they could be good casters if they had the casting ability.
So they're leaders. They have that leadership. They cause fear, so that's really powerful. That's part of the reason they're more expensive.
They're not affected by fear either,
which is also why they're so fucking expensive. And they're utterly immune to poison, and they cannot get stunned.
Yeah, they're, like I said, these guys carry the poor band.
They basically, yeah. I mean, alternatively, you can use necromancers. They're able to kind of pull their own weight a bit.
They have magic.
Yep, they're essentially acolytes of Vlad, who is a necromancer himself. And these guys have magic, and they're pretty decent. Necromantic magic is decent. Now,
then they're the dregs.
These are the last group that actually can grow in experience, and these are trash.
Yeah, they're interesting. These guys are either Sylvanians that came along with their masters, or people of Mordheim are like, yeah, things are so bad, I'm going to sign up. I'd
rather sign up to the vampire. Yes. They're sent to buy equipment, weapons, and supply. You need at least 1, ideally, if you want to deal with the merchants. And on top of that, they're able to use all of the weapons and armor, and you can order them around, and they're not brainless. They're not great, but they can improve in stats too, because, they're mortal.
Yeah. Then there's zombies.
Notice that zombies are cheaper than dregs. That should tell you something.
Zombies may not have any weapons or armor.
Yep.
But they have some rules. They cause fear. They can't run, so they just shamble.
Yeah.
They're immune to psychology.
They are able to charge.
Yeah. No brain. Never gain experience. Never learn from their mistakes. What did you expect?
I love that. What did you expect? What were you thinking? I'm just envisioning, like, Vlad von Karstein in the form of Omni-Man, like, insulting the
notice
necromancer.
Something about zombies. They have no cap.
Yeah, you can get, like, if you have the money and you're just feeling really stupid.
And models.
If you're really stupid, you could just be like, I'm going to take this skirmish game.
I'm going to clog the crates.
I will fuck your world.
I'm just trying to imagine, like, a ranged heavy army. You just bring, like, 10 zombies and just shove them down the street at them.
I'm just envisioning a scenario where, like, you see the Sisters of Sigmar fighting with the witch. No, even the witch hunter would the witch hunter still fight them, or would they deal and then fight after the fight? Because here's the thing, they're heretics.
I remember, burn the witch. No, burn the witch. Remember, hatred.
So they'd go for the sisters first, still.
Yeah, because there's at least one. Because you don't technically have to bring a necromancer, but you have to bring a matriarch who is always a caster.
Okay, then. So that means that you could see there's this dumb scenario where the vampire brings a horde, like he has 1 dreg because, you need to buy stuff, and a horde of zombies. And the witch hunter looks to the vampire who's clearly fucking drinking blood, Deal to kill these heretics? Yeah, sure, whatever. Deal. And they just sit there fucking drinking meat and blood as the sisters get violated by the zombies and witch hunters.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking
they're the ghouls.
awful. Fucking
Ghouls
awful.
Yeah, but hey, accurate.
I
Ghouls,
love it.
they're not technically undead.
They're actually, no.
Technically.
No, they're not undead at all. Here's the fun thing with ghouls in the setting. You're joking? These are what happens when you commit cannibalism. See,
well, too much cannibalism, specifically.
Yeah, I mean, you can get away with a little bit, but that act is innately chaotic and innately necromantic. And what happens is, this is most common in Sylvania and also in Bretonnia, which is the not France. If you keep eating bodies because the times are bad, you'll turn into one of these. Or it'll be expressed through your child.
Yeah.
They're living, technically. They're alive, they have a heartbeat, they move, but they act like undead and they're drawn by necromantic energy.
Yeah, these guys are actually pretty decent henchmen because these guys, they, unlike the no brain, they actually can gain experience.
They have brain. Yeah, they do have brain.
Yeah.
That's the thing about
the weapon equipment, they may never use equipment apart from a few bones they use as primitive weapons, which is a bit vague, but it essentially means they can like.
You can get if you gave a ghoul a club, I think you could get it by the official.
Or a dagger. Yeah, a dagger.
You can get away with probably a club instead, but a dagger or club.
Look at that stat line. 2 attacks.
2 attack, like they're pretty weak, but there's a couple of things that we're not showing about them. They cause fear. But there's actually one more element that's not in here that I think should have been. Ghouls in the actual tabletop also have a poison effect. Because they're eating so much garbage.
I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think special rules for that are added in supplements. Because this is still the core we're looking at.
Yep. So basically these guys ate meat until they went nutso. And they're actually, for undead, by pound for undead, yeah, they're actually, no, they're even better than zombies, but and you can also oh yeah, you can only have like 5. Oh wait, no, you can have as many, remember?
Oh yeah, there's actually no rule for ghouls, but they can only be bought in groups of 1 to 5, whereas zombies can just be bought as unlimited.
So again, the same scenario where you just hear ghouls gibber, flesh, must flesh, must flesh. And the witch hunter's like, deal to kill the witches. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Then there are the direwolves. These guys have a cap, though. They're expensive.
Look at their movement.
9.
Have fun.
Yeah, and they can, unlike zombies, these guys can charge.
Yeah, they don't gain experience
when they charge. And they get 2 attacks when they charge.
Direwolves don't gain experience. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. That's actually great. They have no pain, so they're immune to stunning, immune to poison, immune to fear, cause fear. They can't run, but they can charge, and they're really damn fast when they charge.
They don't really even need to run with that 9 movement.
It's horrifying.
Speaking of horrible, the Skaven.
Ah, yes, the
Agents of the Under Empire. Agents of the Under Empire.
So yeah, for thousands of years they've lived, mainly in the sewers of Italy.
Specifically, though, the Skaven you're playing are the Skaven of Clan Eshin, who hilariously in the lore just came back from their sabbatical in the pawn.
Yeah, they went to Japan to train on the road of ultimate.
This is not a joke.
I like the idea they had the same kung fu master as my stupid idea of the orc who knows the way of the fist. I went to the land of Nippon to learn the way of the fist from the great boss. And from there I shall take it and make my school. And school is spelled with a K, by the way.
They really want the warp stone, but the thing is, if they sent like their whole clan here, there's no way they could hide that, and they still want to remain hidden. So they're only sending their
moved to Nippon for a reason. They don't want the other clans to know they exist.
Well, they're aware to a degree because they can still hire from other clans for some of their.
But they don't want to be too obvious.
Yeah, and they're uniquely made for Mordheim in the sense that they're good at keeping a low profile and gathering around.
Yep, and here's what Skaven can equip with. They have unique weapons. Weeping Blades are pretty nasty.
Claws. And the claws.
Both are really nasty. They
and
also
throwing
have the blowpipe.
Blowpipes, and Warplock Pistols.
Warplocks are nasty.
But they can't have. They don't have any heavy armor.
Don't even get us started on the Rattling Gun.
Yeah, but they don't get that. But,
look, there's the trash rats. They're screaming. Yeah. Ah!
But as you know, with their armor, they have no options for heavy armor, so this is not a heavy armor race.
Which is, honestly, that's not bad, given they have unique weapons, and they're supposed to die like frogs in a blood.
Do they got any, stealth capabilities, too, or is this more...
We'll get into that.
They have... Well, you'll look into their seat, but they actually have a large choice of warriors. The Assassin Adepts, who are the leaders.
You need one. An Eshin Sorcerer, which you don't need. Black Skaven, you don't need.
But they give you magic, so you should have...
It's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Black Skaven,
which are elites, essentially.
Night Runners you can include too. And then Vermincane, Giant Rats, which you have to summon. Rat Ogre.
And Rat Ogres, you're an elite, but a very interesting kind of elite.
Your brain no work. So here's some unique equipment. The Blowpipe, it's very rare. Skavens are the only one who really know how to use it. They shoot poison darts.
They are silent. A unique rule, they are stealthy, besides the poison, because it goes in a thing. A Skaven armed with this is hidden whenever they fire. So essentially, if you hide a Skaven and shoot with this, you don't break cover.
On top of that, poison, and it's treated as Black Lotus poison. They also have Warplock Pistols. These are amazing.
Rare. Yeah, save modifier -3, strength 5. Yeah, they're just flat out better than pistols.
Yeah, but they have a habit of exploding. Anyway, Fighting Claws. Strength is user, close combat.
They pair. You have
which is not bad.
They take up both your things, but you get an additional attack. They give you +1 to your initiative when climbing, which is nice. You can still parry with them, but they're cumbersome. So if you're giving someone Fighting Claws, that's all they have.
They're not bad though, especially for Skaven if you have to fight in melee.
Mm-hmm. Weeping Blades, pretty rare.
Same thing as those claws, but they have venomous.
Mm-hmm.
Treated as having Black Lotus.
Weapons. But unlike the claws, you can have a different pair. So, for instance, maybe you could have 2 Warplock Pistols and a pair of Weeping Blades.
So here's the Skaven skill tables. They actually have the most skill adaptability out of the lot.
Adepts can be whatever you want. Black Skaven they're everything except smart academics. Eshin Sorcerers, they're magic users. Whatever. What did you expect? Night Runners are combat they're not the fastest, hilariously, but they're good at combat.
So now Skaven heroes may choose to have this following skill list. They can have the Black Hunger, which is a fighting frenzy they can gain.
Mm-hmm. +1 to any attack and a +D3 to their total move, but will suffer D3 strength 3 hits with no armor saves at the end of their turn. So if you're doing this, they're kind of essentially going into a frenzy before they start coughing up blood.
There's tail fighting. They actually can learn to fight with their tail.
They had extra attack with a weapon.
They can run on walls.
And infiltration. As you mentioned, stealth thing, Iggy.
Here's your stealth.
A Skaven with this skill is always placed on the battlefield after the opposing warband and can be placed anywhere on the table, so long as it is out of sight of any opposing model.
And more than 12 inches away.
Mm-hmm. If both players have models that infiltrate, roll a d6 to see who gets to go first.
And then yell at the win at all costs guy when he starts metagaming, finding your etches in an assassin.
So how does this work? So how will this work? You can just place it anywhere on the map. It's
okay,
not
so
right?
Here's what happens, right? Your opposing warband sets up first.
You do the maps things, who decides who ambushes who, but then regardless of, even if you're getting ambushed,
you could just put some guy somewhere that they can't see or deal with.
Mm-hmm. You've got a Night Runner in the back with a blowpipe just shooting, and he shoots a dart at the Witch Hunter Captain, and who falls over coughing up blood.
Instantly.
And they don't know where it came from.
Instantly, too.
Especially if that Night Runner rolled high initiative.
So the Art of Silent Death is another one. Skavens can master the art of murdering silently.
In hand-to-hand combat, the Skaven can fight with their bare claws without any penalties, and they count as having 2 weapons, which means 2 attacks.
So as a gag, if you want to do that Orc Way of Defist guy, give him the Art of Silent Death.
In addition, a Skaven hero with this skill will cause critical wounds on a 5.
Which is bullshit.
The skill may be used in conjunction with Eshin Fighting Claws, so they get 3 attacks!
Again, bullshit. So, here's the heroes. And actually, here's, I think that's supposed to be, no, that's the Ruins of Mordheim, actually. Okay.
Okay, I get it. You hate me. Just say it already. I'm sorry.
Assassin Adepts. They actually are surprisingly cheap, but we'll see why. They have good movement, good overall stats, except leadership. It's the lowest of all of the captains, actually.
Yeah, that's a tradition with Skaven.
Yep,
Bad
their morale
leadership.
is Garbo. They have the perfect killer, though. So that means that armor saves are harder.
Against them, yeah. Then they're the Black Skaven. These guys are they are the equivalent of the mercenaries champions.
They're also ninja.
Yeah, they are essentially for normal Skaven. These guys would be storm vermin, but Clan Eshin doesn't believe in that kind of stuff because heavy armor isn't stealthy.
So they literally ninja their way to success.
Then they're the sorcerers. They have sneaky Skaven magic.
Yep. And then there are the Night Runners, which are young apprentice ninjas.
Mm-hmm. They're fast. Also, you just notice the movement rates on all these guys pretty fast.
Bullshit. Yeah.
Then there are the Vermin Kid. These guys are the clan.
They are frail. It's just,
Yeah. But notice how none of these guys have less than 5 movement.
So yeah, Vermin King are related to clan rats to it, but not part of the ninja thing.
Yeah, like they're part of the clan, but they're grunts. They're just grunts.
And giant rats. They're basically scions of
unlimited. Also note that unlike the vampires, you can have as many Skaven or giant rats as you want.
Yep, and they don't gain experience, but they are not bad as a trash thing.
Actually, no, these guys can gain experience, except not the giant rats. The vermin can gain experience.
Vermin can, giant rats can't. And last but not least, rat ogres. They're expensive as fuck for a reason.
Look at that stat line.
Look at those 3 attacks.
5 toughness, 3 attacks, 4 leadership.
And 3 wounds, the highest of any one.
Mm-hmm. And they also cause fear. They're also stupid unless this hero is nearby to literally tar wrangle them. They don't gain experience, and they're giant targets.
Yep.
But 3 attacks, 3 wounds, 5 strength.
Starting off, they're really expensive, and they'll either pay off amazingly or you just get fucked.
Mm-hmm. Then there's that time your Skaven heroes get ambushed, and the mutant rat ogre is away from all the heroes, so he just stands there stupidly.
He just stands there looking at there's a running gag in our basically Al, he hasn't been here for a while because he's still recovering from the last book we did. But he runs a game of fantasy roleplay. And a common gag is that whenever a perception roll is utterly failed, there's a purple bee flying around. That fucking rat ogre constantly sees that fucking purple bee every second of his life. Your bee's purple.
Mm-hmm. And since we finished that part of the book, let's look at the chat.
Yep. Let's see. After shooting
you have to pay for your weapons and equipment. That means you pay for their dental for the warhounds, right?
Maybe.
Ogres, my lord. Witch Hunter Stargun. Oh, yeah, I forgot that guy.
See, it was feminism that ruined Mordheim.
Oh, yeah. No.
I know it's passé, but I like the touches on certain groups getting screwed harder than others due to prejudice. You can work a lot of interesting stories there.
Yeah, and that's a case of the sisters were... It's kind of similar to, certain religious movements. Like, a lot of people forget that the Jesuits, before they became officiated, were almost wiped out as a heresy for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and D&D Dark Elves. So Warpstone can be used to raise the undead. It's a versatile MacGuffin.
Yep. Also, Bretonnian, Patriarchal, and Feudal. Yeah, it doesn't matter in
Yeah.
this setting.
Yeah, it
Dark
doesn't
Elves,
matter.
they
But
don't
yeah, you're
matter.
right. But you're right. See, I knew weed was bad for you. Oh wait, you said cannibalism, not cannibism. My bad. Living cursed are neat. Yeah, they are. 50 crowns a direwolf. Dental and flea collars are expensive.
Well, they're
I mean, are you
undead.
really paying dental on the undead? Yeah.
It's just the Warpstone to raise them. We don't need to be
Black
too
Lotus
obvious.
clothing.
We are very sneaky. Yes, yeah.
Black Lotus, yeah, which is why we can hire a rat ogre.
It makes you spend unreasonable amounts of money on printed cardboard. So the Skaven eat their fallen enemies, right? And they use a lot of poison. So they're the Mordheim equivalent of cultures that love spicy food. They're rats.
No, rat ogres are actually a bit worse. Holtz.
Yeah, it's not just Warpstone. Basically, you rip a Skaven apart.
Oh, it's even. Remember, Adam, it's even worse. First, you take a few hundred years ago, you take some Skaven, then you genetically modify them, and then keep having them breed, and then essentially treat them like you would like a bull, and just keep breeding them to make them bigger and bigger and stupider, all the while injecting each of this subsequent generation with Warpstone and other horrible mutagens until you have these horrible, near mindless Skaven that are barely Skaven anymore. Then you start ripping them apart and adding things like hammers for, like giant maces for hands.
So you hear that? Essentially, what you know how Tech Priest occasionally would joke about how he came up with the abortion machine to farm experience in Demon, where you just constantly create false identities as women as a demon, intentionally get them pregnant, and then abort them to get the experience that way. Yeah, the Skaven did something like that. They literally created a fucking inbreeding a Habsburg factory to produce these things.
Mm-hmm. Then started ripping them apart and adding things like just like you think they'd have a point in some of this, but some of the attachments you're like, why? And you just think the guy who did this is just a sadistic fuck.
Well, the thing is, they're founded by, I think it was Clan Skry.
No, it's Mulder. Mulder made these guys.
Mulder's the mad scientist ones. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I always confuse the names because I don't think of them as names, but there's the mad scientist ones, the Beastmaster ones, and then the ninja ones.
Mm-hmm. Then the ones who cough a lot.
So with that in mind, let's thankfully we'll do these last two chunks. It's a pretty in-depth book, and I know that this is an unfamiliar setting to some of you, maybe not to others. But Mordheim's probably pretty unfamiliar even to fantasy players.
Yeah, because it's not really it wasn't a big event.
So warbands travel the city of the Dam all over the old world. This is how to set up campaigns, and each faction has its own series of win conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So for a campaign, you need at least 2 players, preferably 3. And you need more than one. You may have more than one warband, but it's easier to do it one at a time.
Yeah, but it's also kind of one of those things where you keep running. You again? If it's the same warband and the same players, just like you again, you again, you again.
So new players can join the campaign anytime afterwards. New warbands will be less experienced. They'll basically level up quicker. Essentially, die until you fly is kind of the ethos if you join one of these.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, and essentially one of the most important things in playing a campaign is collecting words down.
Yep, warband ratings, that's a thing, post-battle sequence. They work their way through the following sequence. You don't have to work through all of it at once. Try to do at least the first 3 parts. This is a suggestion by the creator. Try to do the first chunk after battle. You might want to consider purchases later. So, first, injuries. Determine the extent of injuries for each warrior who is out of action at the end of the game because they got injured, or even maybe died. Allocate experience. Heroes and henchmen groups gain experience for surviving battles, even the ones that actually get fucked up by injuries.
Oh yeah, if they survive, it's still an experience.
So roll on the exploration chart. That's basically the map of Mordheim. Sell your Weirdstone. This can only be done afterwards. Check available veterans. See how much experience worth of veterans is available. You don't have to commit to hiring. Then you do.
Using the roster.
Yeah, then you do an acquisition check if there's any rare items from the merchants and the money grubbers. Look for important people. Hire new
It's
recruits to replace the old ones. Buy items.
Mhm. We allocate equipment, which means, like, say for instance, you're like, James the mutant, he could have really used like a bow last session. Like he would have been he didn't really do very good in melee. I think I'll just give him a bow and let him hang back.
You see, Johannes the mutant, he gained a tentacle arm, which unfortunately means he cannot use the bow anymore. So I must give it to
axe.
Brother Frederick.
But that axe is useful.
Yes.
In fact, give him 2. Put 1 in the tentacle arm.
So that's an example of that.
And obviously, if your old warband's too fucked up, you could start over again.
Yep, disbanding.
You don't keep any XP. You don't keep any XP, but you keep your money.
And any warriors that are still kind of functional, like your champions and heroes, you could hire them again in a new warband.
Mm-hmm. Death of a warrior. When a warrior is killed, all his weapons and equipment are lost. It's presumably because you guys didn't track his body back.
Well, there's no, like, in some cases, literally you fucking can't. Like, when a hellhound is after you, you're not getting that body back.
Or the wizard blew himself into tiny giblets.
So the thing is, though, when a leader dies, the next highest leadership takes command. He then
hero
automatically gains the leader and gains the equipment lift. If there's more than one hero eligible, the warrior with the most experience becomes the leader.
Also, no, that is the reason why the Rat Ogre, despite being a unique thing you can only get 1 of, is not a hero, because there's no fucking way in hell a Rat Ogre can lead a warband.
Although that could be a funny scam where you just have one of the Skaven try to, like, trick the others. That could be funny.
Mm-hmm. The warbands, there's some unique rules for the certain factions, etc.
And there's examples like if you lose all your heroes, the henchmen are just going to leave.
Yeah, why would they stick around?
In the case of undead, though, and this is why it's a great idea to have a necromancer, or even a dreg. But dregs can't do this. You need a necromancer for this. If your vampire dies, you need a necromancer to be the leader, because otherwise your warband's gone.
Well, yeah, because the ghouls will fuck off because there's no more dark energy to control them. The zombies fall apart, and the desirables fall apart.
Yep. Although a hilarious idea is a dregs only game where you eventually convert one of them into a hero. That could be pretty goofy. You're not gonna do well in that situation, but still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, for the record, even though vampires don't have spellcasting, it's kind of assumed that since they are the leaders, and they can still have undead, it's kind of assumed that
they exude that energy just from their existence because they're higher.
Sisters of Sigmar possessed in Carnival. My Carnival isn't mentioned here because the DLC essentially.
They're DLC.
If they die, they get their successors are entitled to learn magic, which can be very interesting if you have a possess.
All this time, just Carnival and shit like that. All I'm just thinking of are Insane Clown Posse. They all became chaos.
You're joking, but that's kind of their thing. They even have a literal fucking dark carnival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to include the Insane Clown Posse as your Carnival of Chaos, there you go. Do you want Juggalos to fucking wreak havoc in Mordheim? Why not?
You can, and then moving to buy equipment, you can buy between games. You can buy your equipment from the traders.
Yep, that's the important
or sell
section.
old equipment, or sell old equipment.
Which sometimes you just don't find that this thing that you got isn't useful for you anymore.
Then serious injuries, which they have an injury table laid up, but essentially, if you get laid out, if you're stunned, essentially you don't die instantly.
If you're stunned or just knocked on your ass, the 2 lower ones, you take nothing. But if you're out of combat action, here's where it comes in.
Mm-hmm. Or if they get a critical hit but survive, you still have to roll in the serious injury table.
Yep. So when a henchman receives a serious injury, it's different than if a hero did. This is to represent the greater effect losing a hero would.
Mm-hmm. On a 1d2, on a d6, if a 1 or 2 means they might not be dead, but they might as well be.
So yeah, henchmen who are out of action at the end of battle are removed permanently from the roster sheet on a d6 roll of 1 or 2. They may have either died, suffered enough injuries to basically have to retire, or
just say fuck this. Yeah, 3 to 6, they come back and they grumble, but they
might get a scar. Yeah. So heroes though, Okay, you have to roll 2d6s. The first represents
Yep.
10, and basically they're your percentile almost.
Mm-hmm.
So in a roll of 1 and 5 is a 15, a roll of 3 and 6 is 36. This type of is a d66. Yes, they use this. This is the first game I've ever seen this system used. I know it's a hypothetical. I've just never seen it in action. Holy shit.
Now, you sound interested, but yeah, look at this great table. If you roll
Snake Eyes or 1 and 5, get dead.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, let's put it this way: it follows the thing of lower is bad. Then again, some higher ones are also pretty bad.
Yep, 16 and 21, multiple injuries. Roll d6 times on the injury.
No. And then roll d6. Reroll on. You can reroll if you reroll on dead. You can get dead, captured, or multiple injuries again.
No, you reroll. Yeah, no, you reroll.
Reroll. My bad. Leg wounded. Lose movement. You lose a movement pip.
That's not good. You can actually be rendered impossible to use after a certain point.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can, which is some cases, essentially take him behind the back and shoot him at that point.
So
arm wound. You can either lose the arm, it's have to be amputated. You lose the ability to use single-handed weapons in that arm, but it's still there, so like you can put a shield on it. Light wound, whatever.
Oh no.
They have to,
1 is you lose the arm. 2 is you can't use them next session.
2 to 6. You can't use them next session while they're healing. It's madness.
Because you're fighting chaos, so.
Well, or just PTSD. 1 to 3, you get stupidity. You got a head wound, and you're going, oh.
So imagine you have this wizard. Imagine you have a wizard leading your group, and he turns into potato brain.
You say that
pudding head.
You say that, but in the video game version of this, I've had wizards get stupidity, and it sucks.
Pudding brain priest.
Especially when your leader gets it. 4 to 6, though, they get frenzy,
which is more doable.
Smashed leg. 1, the worst. They can't run but they can't run anymore, but they can still charge. 2 to 6, miss the next session.
Chest wound. You lose toughness.
There's no roll. You just lose toughness.
Blinded in an eye. You lose a little bit of ballistic skill, which is really bad if it happens on your Reichsland captain.
If it happened on your swordsman, who cares?
Yeah, but like your Middenland berserker, he doesn't fucking care.
Old battle wound. They survive, but the wound will prevent him from fighting prevent him from fighting if you roll a 1 on a 1d6. So essentially,
my lumbago.
Essentially, my old wound is flaring up.
Ooh, ow, my bones hurt. I shouldn't have drank that bone hurting
every
juice.
Battle, at any battle, every time you come back from battle, you have to roll a 1d6 to see if he's taken out of action for the next round.
My
next
bones. It's a nervous condition. Your initiative's removed a bit.
Hand injury, lose weapon skill, deep wounds. Warrior suffer miss the next E3 games. But he's still as good as he'll be. He won't get the experience from the next 3 battles.
You lose all items and equipment if you're robbed.
But you're alive.
Full recovery. You've just been knocked out. Suffer a light wound for which.
And actually, it's actually a pretty high chance of that. 41 to 55.
Yep. Bitter enemy. Make a full physical recovery.
This is what I mentioned. You can get hatred, where you can get hatred from.
Yep. It can be either just that person. If it's a henchman, you hate the enemy leader instead. It could be the leader, the entire warband, or all of that type.
So essentially, if you roll a d6, I'm just imagining this witch hunter gets smashed in the head by a zombie.
No, by a drag.
Yeah.
Like the Igor who hits him with a shoe and knocks
and then
him over.
And then he rolls a 1, and he just hates that specific drag because dregs aren't henchmen. They're considered technically specials. They're not dregs.
So it's it's Igor the Shoeman. He literally uses a fucking shoe as his weapon.
Captured. You're a prisoner, and this has some implication on who you get sold to, but who you got captured by. You can be ransomed if they're feeling generous.
Like let's say you're lucky and the Middenlander, the Middenlanders get you, or like the Marienburgers.
Yeah, captives can be sold to slavers for D6 times 5 gold. Undead can kill you and just get a zombie. Possessed can sacrifice you and gain experience.
I love that.
Captives who are exchanged also lose all of their
Character.
No, they
they
retain it.
retain all of it. Yeah. If captives are sold, though, their captors get it.
How dare you kill my OC?
Then
Fuck
there's
you.
Hardened. These guys come back, but now they get immune to fear.
Which is nice.
Horrible wounds, they cause fear.
Sold to the pits.
Essentially, your warband doesn't even like the other essentially, you got left behind, and some slavers like hiding in the like the sewers come in and drag you to the pit.
Yep, and if you win, if you lose, you either die or get injured again. If he's not dead, he's thrown out of the fighting pits without his armor. But if he wins, you gain more experience.
And gold.
So,
and they can just rejoin with all their weapons and equipment. And then there's 66, the highest.
Just gain
You're
an
fine.
experience.
Like, literally. Like, somehow, even though your warband abandoned you, you're fine. In fact, you benefited. You got an experience point.
So here's experience. The X looks like an R, so it's Erperience. I mean, it's an X. It's just the font.
Once a warrior has enough points to gain in advance, this takes the form of an increased characteristic or new skill.
I was just going to show what so underdogs, they gain extra experience. So let's say you're fighting something you shouldn't win, like let's say like they have 100 points above you. You gain extra experience if you somehow fucking don't die.
Or at least survive.
Yeah, you don't have to win. You just have to not die. So advance rolls, make advance rolls right after the battle so both can witness the result. 2d6 to see. For heroes, they can gain a new skill, which is always nice. If they have a wizard, they can choose to randomly generate a new spell. Characteristic increase, roll again. 1 to 3, plus 1 to strength. 4 to 6, plus 1 to attack. A number of attacks. Basically, you can improve your characteristics or gain another new skill.
Mm-hmm. Characteristics, you get some initiative, some leadership, some wounds, some toughness, new skills. Yeah, henchmen, they're a bit different. They can never add more than +1 to any of their initial characteristics. So they can't ever get more than 1 attack than 2 attacks, essentially.
This is the
and they can only improve their stats up by 1.
So this is the garbage
and specific, but technically you can. But then they've got talent. One model in the group can become a hero. If you already have a maximum number, so technically, as you mentioned, Adam, with this skill, technically, you could do something really stupid. And like, let's say
the Rat Ogre. The Rat Ogre could hypothetically, since he's
no, they can't get experience. No, they can't get experience. Remember,
the Ghoul though can.
Yeah, a Ghoul, but they can't get a Necromancy. But what I was gonna say is technically you could do something
the Beastmen.
Stupid. Yeah, Beastmen. You could do a Beastman becomes a leader of the Cult of Possessed.
You could actually have, you could have the Beastman become the captain.
Yeah, and technically because he can learn magic too. Because as I said, the leader is entitled to learn magic. So can you imagine it? A Beastman dueling axes while at the same time screaming praise to the Shadow Lord as knives appear in his opponent's head.
Or alternatively, you know that Igor the Shoeman? He could, hypothetically, become the dreaded Igor, Grand Necromancer, who throws shoes at you.
Mm-hmm. There are new types of skill your heroes can choose as he gains skills. He can immediately make one roll of the hero advance. Remaining members of the henchmen can gain some bonus XP, essentially.
And here's the increases for humans, elves, dwarves, this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Because it mentions the hired. So, no, actually, funny enough, the one I think is funny, an ogre. Can you imagine an ogre hired sword leading a mercenary company?
Yes,
I totally can. And this is actually, if you're wondering why these are here, it's mainly just to be like, hey, you know those fantasy models you have? You can use them here too.
Mm-hmm. You get some bonuses for
and these are your the farthest you can bullshit.
So in essence, if you look at the stat ranges for, say, of an ogre, look at those. Look at that wounds.
Yeah, they're tough as fuck. There's a reason they're hired a lot.
5 attacks.
Halflings ain't nothing to sneeze at. Look at their ballistic skill.
Bonk.
And Gores ain't bad either. They have okay. They're not the greatest at leadership, but they're better than average. Oh, they're about average below. They have 4 wounds, so they're a little tougher, and good ballistic skill, surprisingly.
Also, they know with the possessed, that's not including any mutations they get.
Yep.
Which, for instance, if they get an extra arm, they can get 6 attack.
So here's the skill list. There's a bunch of these. We're just gonna kind of skim over since it's getting late.
Yeah, just some of them are nice. Stuff like
most of them aren't terrible. It's just some like all lists. There's some that are better than others.
Also, those things they showed before with stuff that kind of says what skills they can get. For instance, the warrior priest isn't gonna get fucking pistolier as a skill.
So here's starting the game. There's a pre-battle sequence. This kind of just shows you the scenario tables. Place in Area 5, Secret Treasure, Weirdstone Hunt, Occupy, Skirmish, Breakthrough, Surprise. These are just the different setups for Mordheim.
And in some cases, the players get to choose depending on the role.
Yep. Defend the find. In this case, basically one party has the item they found and the other ambushes them. The Witch Hunter in this case found it, and the Marienburgers, wanted to take it.
Warpstone. 1 shot of Warpstone for each hero who is inside the building. Yeah, because you're going to be getting Warpstone from this.
Yep.
Skirmish, you run into each other randomly, fight.
If at the end of the turn, the defender, the attacker has more standing models within 6 inches of the objective than the defender, the attacker wins. Or when one of the warbands fails its route tests. So technically, in one of those underdog things, you could just have a bunch of gobos. You play silly. You play a small goblin band with like the largest goblin wearing a pointy hat, right? They could just steal from a very well-equipped witch hunter group the Weirdstone.
And there's some unique experience. Yeah, and you get more experience for this. You get 1 experience for living. 1 if the leader gets 1 if he wins, and every unit gains 1 experience.
But only the hero.
Yeah. 1 per out of action. Any hero who kills something gets experience.
Yep, so skirmish, you just run into each other. When one of them routes, that's how it goes. Similar experience thing.
Weirdstone Hunt.
Weirdstone
Hunt. Special rules. Once you play a bunch of Weirdstone around the map.
Yep, you got to get the plastic. Just kind of randomly put it there where the shards. One who finds the most wins. Or when one runs.
Well, technically, the way the game is going to work is that it's weird, but you don't get all the Weirdstone even if you win. So a weird tactic that you can do is essentially stall the game.
And run.
Yes, or stall it's where you can stall the game and have a really fast character run around and grab all the Weirdstone. Or if you want to be a prick, let your enemy gather all the Weirdstone, kill the guy who's carrying it, and then nab it off his corpse.
I was thinking a very funny douche move is you take, one of the black rats, deep strike into it, have them just yeet around the fucking map silently as you just, fuck with the other group.
Then purposely fail their route test.
And then intentionally fail. Don't even roll. Just say, I leave.
They get the experience. Like, the opponent gets,
They get 2 experience, but...
But you also get 1 per Weirdstone grabbed.
So you could lose and still win.
Also, Weirdstone is unique in the sense that henchmen, it doesn't matter if it's a hero or a henchman, they get the experience regardless, unlike out of action.
So here's Breakthrough. Basically...
You're assaulting someplace.
Yeah, you're just attacking. Street Fight, you're just murdering people in the street. You actually gain some experience from just running.
Sometimes...
Just bad luck, you run into each other. Hidden Treasure, this is the Witch Hunter Marienburg fight. Because they both found it at about the same time.
But the Witch Hunters got there just a little before.
So the ways this one works is all the warriors in each warband know roughly what they're looking for. If you've not scored a 12 on any roll, there's only 1 building left to search, it'll automatically be found there. And here's how you can win.
All warriors, not animals.
When one warband gets the treasure to safety or a warband fails the route, it just ends.
Well, yeah,
you gain from experience, winning leader, enemy put out, but you gain 2 extra if you find the chest.
If a hero finds the treasure chest.
You don't have to keep it, though. You just find it.
Occupy. You're trying to take land.
Yep, hold it over. Like, in this case, Sisters of Sigmar are trying to reestablish order in, like, this one neighborhood. And then the witch hunters cause shit. Or actually, let's change it up. Some dwarven treasure hunters, because we haven't mentioned them yet, they figured out that in that neighborhood, one of the older brother of the leader of the hunters died around there. So he's trying to find his Gromrel axe. And the dwarves just think the sisters are hiding it.
And the special rules for this is you're actually trying to capture buildings on the map.
Yeah, in this case, the dwarves are trying to find trying to take the building so they can search for the axe inside them.
Ending the game. There's no need to take any route test. The game only can last 8 rounds. If a warband voluntarily routes, the game ends. Essentially, this is just essentially about claiming as much land as possible.
It's mostly just in cases where there's a fuckload of weird stone, or other wealth.
Winning leader. If both sides occupy the same number of buildings, the battle is considered a draw and no one gains any bonus.
Yeah, so this is one of the ones where you can actually just say truce for the night.
Surprise attack. You're attacking the group and they don't get a choice.
This is what the Marienburgers had the fun of doing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love this guy. Look at this man with his candle hat. I love it.
He's setting up for the 1d6s. Look.
I love it.
Starting the game, the attackers always start first, so initiative is ignored essentially for the first round.
Yep, have fun, fuckos. That's the unique thing. And basically, it's like every other fight. It's just the attacker gets one.
Oh, and no, here's the thing I love especially about surprise attack. Set up, the defending player rolls a d6 for every hero and henchman. 1d3, they're placed randomly around.
Yeah, have fun, fucko.
Because you're ambushing them when the unexpected. Essentially, what happens is something fucking startles you, like a giant demon comes out. You all run and hide, and then when you're all running and hiding, the scaling come out and come and stab you.
Yep. Anyway, income, since it's getting long in the tooth.
Yeah. Money is important.
So during exploration, it's done as soon as the game's over. You roll a d6 for each hero in your warband who survives going out of action. That represents your efforts to unearth Weirdstone. Don't roll for any heroes who went out of action, though. They're just taken away. Do not roll for henchmen. That doesn't mean they won't search the ruins, but it represents the efforts of the heroes in coordinating. So you only roll for heroes. Rolling multiples. You can come across unusual places or encounter inhabitants of Rune City. If you roll 2 or more of the same number while searching, you found an unusual building or encountered something weird. If you roll 2 3s or 3 5s, in which case you should refer to the chart. We'll get into that chart later. So here's the procedure. You roll a d6 for each of your heroes who survived the battle, and an extra die if you won. Plus any extra dice followed by skills. Some things, such as skills or equipment, may allow you to re-roll, so that can happen.
Or if you're an elven ranger, or if you're an elf.
Yeah, and if you rolled any dubs or trips, you encountered something weird. And
then you add the results together.
And here's the results you get.
Mm-hmm.
You're always guaranteed
max number of shards you get.
You're almost always guaranteed 1.
And the max is 7. And then for the example, but it's long and tiny print.
So here's some exploration charts. For 2 dubs, you can find a well, which is good for resupplying water. Shop, a body, stragglers, overturned cart, ruined hovels, a tavern, smithy, prisoner. Here's some of the weird stuff you can find.
A gunsmith, an active gunsmith from the sound of it, a shrine, a townhouse, an armor, a graveyard, great for your necromancers,
and catacombs, which is great for necromancy, or bad. You can figure out, don't go down there, or maybe I have to.
5 of a kind, a moneylender's house, an alchemist, a labyrinth, a jewelsmith, a merchant, a shattered building, which could have anything, an entrance to the catacombs, and then
the pit.
6 dubs, the pit.
And then
hidden treasure, a dwarf, a full-on slaughtered warband, which means you get all of their goodies, a fighting arena, or a noble's villa.
Again,
and then that's a warboard. We can skip that.
Yep. Just a little bit about necromancers and why they're using the weird stones. And here's the list.
Wells. Choose one of your heroes. Roll a d6. If the result is equal or lower to their toughness, he finds some wordstone. If he fails, you drink the tainted water and miss the game.
Drink the poo water.
shop, you get a chance. You can find some loot of a 1d6 gold. If you find a 1, you get a lucky charm.
Just
The corpse.
Here's some stuff they got.
A straggler, Skaven. It depends. Once again, depends on who you are. Skaven can sell them to as slaves or use them as food.
Yep.
And gain money. Possessed can sacrifice these guys,
or make them join. That could be funny.
Yeah, they become another. Not a Dark Soul, but the other guys. Undead, can kill them. You don't have to do any of this. These are just things you can do. Any other warband can interrogate the man and gain insight to the city. Next time you roll an exploration chart, you get to add a die. Or discard a die.
Yep, overturned cart, stuck in a ruined gateway's cart, and you can get a map of Mordheim, which they vary. They vary from crap to good.
Some money or a jeweled sword and dagger, which can be sold at twice the price.
Yep, it's nice. Ruined hovels.
Ruined hovels, money. You get some money. You get a tavern. Money. Tavern, you can gain some booze.
Yeah, the upper parts of the building ruined, but the cellars are good. And yeah, you got the alcoholism.
If he fails, the men drink most of the alcohol despite the leader's threats and curses. Obviously, if you're undead, witch hunters
auto pass.
Well, yeah, the undead don't need to drink. The witch hunters are too fanatical, and the sisters too sabbatical. They don't go on those sabbaticals. A smithy, you can get some good. You can get some weapons. Prisoners, it's kind of the same thing as stragglers times a few. Fletcher, range stuff for bows, specifically in crossbows. Market hall, you gain some money.
I'm just quickly looking at what the prisoners can do. Escort, they're rewarded with gold, so hey, and one of them might join, so you can get guys that way.
Returning a favor, you choose the service of you can gain the service of a hired sword, free of charge for the next battle. He will depart, but you don't have, or you can continue to pay his upkeep. Gunsmiths, you don't think you need to explain that you get guns. A shrine, you can either strip it if you're cruel, but a Sister of Sigmar or a witch hunters can pray to get some.
Save them too.
Yeah. Undead, and you will always, and you can get some holy weapons to wound the undead or possessed. Townhouses, money.
Yep,
armor.
Yep. Graveyard.
Any warband apart from witch hunters or Sisters of Sigmar may loot the corpses, gain money. If you loot the graveyard, the next time you play against the Sisters of Sigmar or the witch hunters, they will all gain hatred against you.
Which I love.
Make a note of this. Witch hunters and Sisters of Sigmar may steal from the graves. They will be reported for their piety. Steal the graves. Steal the graves. Oh, they gain experience from that.
Yep, and that's actually nice. And it also means that if the necromancer finds that graveyard, they can't get bodies. At least as easily.
Yeah. Catacombs. You can use the new tunnels you found in the next battle you play. Position up to 3 fighters not possessed or rat ogres anywhere on the battlefield at the ground level.
Pretty great.
Essentially, you found the sewers and you can maneuver through them. So long as you're not ambushed.
Honeylander's house. It's...
Honey.
Yeah, a lot. Alchemist lab.
Alchemist. You can find some stuff, but you can also find an alchemist's notebook and gain extra wisdom. You can get an academic skill
too. Jewel Smith, which is nice.
Money and +1 for locating rare items. Merchant's house. Money. In fact, a lot of money.
These are money, except for shattered buildings, which give you a fuckload of weird stone.
You can also gain the skill haggle if you get lucky.
And you can
shattered
get a
building. Entrance to the
proper entrance.
Make a note of this, so essentially all of your units, including the big guys, can reroll
on exploration. So if you're really lucky, this is extremely useful.
And then there's the pit. You have come within. This is important, so I'm going to read the orbit quickly. You have come within sight of the pit, the huge crater created by the comet. The black cloud still rises, but you see the glowing wordstone everywhere. This is domain of the Shadow Lord, Lord of the Possessed, and no one is welcome here, even his own followers. Roll a 1d6. 1.
Well, you don't
your hero
have
is
to.
Dead. As you wished, you can. Yeah, but if you want to explore the pit on a 1, they die instantly.
Yep. But if
on a 2, they gain d6 + 1 weirdstone.
Not a bad option.
Hidden treasure.
It's a risk and reward sort of thing.
Hidden treasure. You're getting something good regardless. Dwarven smithy. You gain some Gromrindle stuff.
Well, potentially.
Yeah. Regardless, you're getting heavy armor, double-bladed access. Slaughtered Warband.
this is
After
useful.
giving the dead their final rites if you're a witch hunter or sister, or eating them if you're the undead or Skaven, or just looting them, you can find the following items. Roll each item separately, apart from the golden daggers, to see what you find.
And that's pretty good. The fighting arena, this is actually the pit fights we mentioned.
You can get a training manual for 100 gold, or which you can either sell for 100 gold or let a hero read. They gain extra knowledge, lets them gain a combat skill. Oh, and his weapon skill may be increased by an extra point above his normal racial maximum. For instance, a human who has read a book can have weapon skill 7.
Which is nice.
Finally, Noble's Villa. D6,
money.
2 to...
Or
you get lots of money. 3 poison. Yeah, magic. Then there's magic. Then there's magic items, which you can get from rewards or from exploration.
We're just
not going to go over all this
through because it's long. We've been here for over 3 hours easily.
But they're all good.
Selling Weirdstone.
Burning.
So, oh wow, you're still here.
I think everyone in chat's still here.
I can't believe they put up with us.
I know, it's amazing. So, selling Weirdstone, the more models there are in Warband, the more it costs to maintain, since there is a maintenance level.
Mm-hmm. And they do note that the Sisters of Sigmar are a bit different with their income because
they're native here and they don't need it.
Also, they're a monastic order.
They give it to their temple.
Mm-hmm. Thus, the warbands of the Sisterhood compete with each other to gain the best weapons, but they're not actually in conflict. So, this is the rare case where the Sisters of Sigmar will not essentially be fighting each other. So, like, if two sisters come into conflict, essentially re-roll that didn't happen. Witch hunters will kill each other because they're crazy enough
to kill each other. I would probably do something similar where you do, the pit, where you do a d6 where on anything above 2 or better, they're fellow travelers. They're out to cleanse the heresy. You might trade a few trinkets or something. On a 1, though, no, the other witch hunter is clearly a heretic.
Mm-hmm. Skaven, well, obviously, they don't care.
They fight each other all the damn time anyway.
Possessed, they're crazy. Who cares?
They're crazy. Who cares? Besides, Chaos kind of fights each other, too.
Mm-hmm. The vampires, they all tend to be working for the same time, but at the same time, they're
ambitious.
The vampires. Yeah, they're aristocrats who probably have grudges. They probably have a grudge against that vampire.
Soul well, they have ambition, but no empathy, no morality.
Hell, probably your vampire probably has a grudge against the other guy's vampire from like a few decades ago.
So while you could maybe have them work together for a scene, they're just as likely. I'd probably do like a flip a coin thing.
Mm-hmm. They also have things for Skaven and Undead. Because, they don't really care about gold, but they send all their wordstones to their superiors for resources and aid.
Yep. And as for spending income, well, here's how you do it. There's trades. You can get new recruits this way, hired swords, which allows you to use your units from fantasy. Getting new recruits or improving your henchman groups, or buying weapons if you're having trouble. You can also just kind of barter.
Mm-hmm. If you collected a bunch of halberds that you don't really need, sell them off.
Yep, and availability. And here's how you sell. So here's the list of stuff and how rare they are.
We don't really need to go over this. It's simple enough.
The only thing I'll explain is that the way rares work are you roll 2d6. Common, you're able to get. Anything with rare, you roll 2d6, and hey, if you're lucky, like let's say I want to get a crossbow pistol, right? For my Reichslander captain. I have to roll a 2d6. If I get a 9 or better, I got it. If I don't, they don't have it available. So I'll just have to stick with the, pistol.
Yeah, and as you know, Grombrindle and Grombrindle weapons are rare 11.
Yeah, I mean, you can get them on an 11 or 12, but the rarest of all, though, is the Tome of Magic. And the Elven Cloak. Oh, and the Elf Bow. All of these are extremely rare.
Then there are the hired swords, your mercs.
Because
even more than mercs, they are weird mercs.
This allows you to pay for things you wouldn't otherwise be able to field in your army.
Mm-hmm. And hired swords, if they go out of action, if they get a 1 to 2, they're not dead, they're lost.
So the way
Who
their
knows what
fee
happened?
works is they have the hiring fee and an upkeep fee. You have to upkeep your other goons, but they're cheaper than a hired sword.
Because they're all kind of a part of the same thing, but hired swords, they're really lone wolves.
Yep, they gain experience exactly the same way. And here's some
So
ideas.
if you're willing to pay, you can keep them around.
So pit fighters, they're actually they actually might have been from Mordheim themselves, but straight up combat is a common thing in the Empire. Essentially, you
And they're
hire a
beasts.
gladiator to join you.
And if you note, they're better than, say, an Empire champion at the start, especially with those 2 attacks.
Mm-hmm. They cost 30 gold up front and 15.
Also, they come with, unlike other things, hired swords come with weapons in armor.
I think your mooks actually don't cost money upkeep because it's assumed that it's eaten when you
You get all your stuff. Ogres.
They cost a lot more, but there's a reason for that.
Mm-hmm. They may be hired by anyone except the Skaven.
So ogres, they're basically like your 10-foot tall. They're pretty dumb. They ain't troll dumb, but they're your dim-witted guys who. The reason they're so damn expensive, they don't want the gold. They want your provisions. They eat big.
Mm-hmm. Funny enough, they don't have the option to. But look at their stats. It's pretty nice. 3 wounds and 2 attacks and 6 movement.
They don't wear heavy armor, but that's because they don't need it.
Mm-hmm. Also, no, they're always either dual-wielding weapons or using 2-handed weapons.
Yep, and they're large targets, meaning that they have to be shot first. Halflings, they're pretty crap. They usually hide in the moot, which is their homeland. But the ones that are crazy, because the ones that actually go outside their province are seen as absolutely mad. They're one of the best shots in the game.
Mm-hmm. And they have a unique rule, Cook, which essentially it lets you increase the maximum size of your warband by 1.
Because halflings are renowned for their cooking. In fact, actually, the Empire commonly hires them as camp cooks, which is why the Emperor who sold part of her province to the halflings wasn't that dumb, because in exchange he was able to establish, halfling cooks for the army.
Anyway,
it was
skills.
a good exchange.
They also have access to unique skills.
Yep, they have speed and shooting skills. That's what they focus on.
And warlocks. This is the only way human mercenaries are able to get casters.
Because they're not official yet, so these are your hedge wizards. They have a staff. They must have a staff.
They're not chaos. They're not specifically chaos, but
they have 2 spells. They may choose any from the academic. Interestingly enough, they're not a bad replacement for a leader. They have good natural leadership initially. So if you're, they're hired though. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm. So they're going to be expensive.
And they're going to fuck off because there's no point for having them keeping around. So freelancers are your average robber knights. These are your guys that, basically saw Mordheim as a prophet.
However, they have some morals. So, as you'll know, because they can only be hired by mercs or witch hunters.
They will not willingly work with the others because the sisters, they
too
are
weird.
Heretic and weird.
Also, they probably wouldn't be willing to pay them anyway.
Also, they're women.
That too.
No girls allowed.
So the way elves work is mercenaries and witch hunters can hire elf rangers. Even dwarves are willing to hire elf rangers, but they have to pay more.
Because the elf doesn't want to stick around.
Well, no, the dwarves are reluctant to let them stick around too.
Which include dwarves may have higher rangers, but they have to pay more.
Yeah, even dwarves can. Undead and chaos
look at that ballistic skill.
One of the best starting ones, yeah. And they have one of the highest at the end. I think only the halflings.
And they start with an elven cloak, which, as we know, are extremely rare.
On top of that, their bows have super piercing, which you don't see outside of firearms.
And they fought hidden enemies, so if you're fighting Clan Eshin, bring an elf, and that'll fuck them up.
Yep, and they have the range. So elven skill, they're fey. Hostile magics will not work on them at sometimes.
The elf rangers are blessed by Lilith. Once per game, he may re-roll a dice roll.
But only on himself. Anyway, dwarf troll slayers. These are the guys who made a deal to die, but specifically against trolls and the greenskins.
Mm-hmm. Technically, they could level up, but you're like, why would? But you're not elite enough to have those guys.
And it's actually pretty fair that they're pretty cheap to keep around, because as long as you're sending them on death runs, they don't care.
If they roll Death Wish, Troll Slayers seek an honorable death. They ignore any kind of fear and will never need to be tested when fighting alone because they want to die. Hard to kill. Resilient. They can only be taken out of action on a 6 instead of a 5 to 6. So essentially, it's harder to knock them out. You have to kill them. And Hardhead. They ignore special rule. They ignore the pummeling. They ignore pummeling, essentially.
And on top of that, elves have to pay double, because while they want to die, it's better not to die under the fucking command of an elf.
And unique skills. Furious Charge. They double their attacks when they charge, but sub will -1 to hit. Monster Slayer. Against big guy, I get always wound an opponent on a d6 of 4 or better, regardless of their toughness, unless his own strength would mean the lower result is needed.
Yeah. These guys are great and cheap. It's not a bad idea to have one of these guys in your combat line.
If you can, obviously, but you can only have them if you're a human, if you're a merc or a witch hunter.
Yeah.
Because they're not working with the goddamn undead or chaos or women.
Well, the women one's more because they're weird and not following the rules of their kingdom. So here's the Dramatis Personae. These are the most infamous characters you can get. These
like if you want to have them. Yeah.
So here's the Sword of Twilight. Invincible, Wanderer, Hand of Cain.
It's a special rule.
He's an elf psychopath, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Cain
these are the guys you can roll.
Are so elves have their own pantheon, and Cain's their war god. In fantasy,
not just their war god, their murder god.
In fantasy, Cain and Khorne may be the same entity or very closely related.
They're kind of sickos.
And this guy's a fucking lunatic. Moving on. I don't know. Johann the Knife. This is a murder guy.
For all you 40k players out there that are confused, just remember, good old
Cain didn't get broken. Cain didn't get shat on in the setting.
I was gonna say Cain's the one that you use when you want to hype up a super cool character to say he's powerful. As in, Cain just basically gets beaten by the super cool guy that they want to.
Well, it's the Avatar Cain. Avatar, anyway, baby.
Not so much for this setting. Cain.
Anyway, Johann starts with a lot of daggers.
He's an assassin, super assassin. If you hire him, pretty good counter for Clan Etchison.
Mm-hmm. Unlike normal warriors, he gets knife fight and quick shot.
So not a bad pick if you.
He can throw 6 throwing knives in 1 turn.
You also have to keep drugs because he's a drug addict too.
Then there's the High Matriarch of the Sisterhood. She is literally the head of the entire Sisterhood.
And yes, you can hire her, but only for the sisters.
Yeah, it's less even you're hiring her, and more of she decides to aid you. Like, I was in the neighborhood, so I'll help you girls.
Yep, so pretty strong. There's Vezkit, that's the Clan Eshin guys. I call him Etchizen for some reason. I don't know why. There's something with my brain. This guy is pretty fucking badass. Essentially, you've collected so much space crack that he's like, all right, I come to kill. He's
also immune to psychology and pain. He doesn't care.
They bring him here because you've collected enough space crack.
But the really neat thing about him, though, he can shoot and slash in the same turn because his fighting claws have pistols built into them.
Yeah, he's essentially the cyber ninjas from Mortal Kombat.
Man, he's literally a cyborg, metallic body.
He's either Gray Fox or the cyber Lin Kuei from fucking Mortal Kombat.
He's the cyber rat ninja.
He's great. Veskit's fucking great.
And optional rules like critical hit tables.
Yeah, if you like critical hits, I'm not a big fan of them. Unless you roll a 6. This is something you kind of have to, though, if you're rolling a D6. These are just variations to it. Here's how to run from combat. Rewards of the Shadow Lord. So this is for the possessed, not the Carnival of Chaos.
When a magister or mutant from the possessed has accumulated enough experience, instead of picking a skill, he can roll on a reward. He gets a boon of chaos. Wrath of the Shadow Lord. Fuck you!
You become a...
No,
and you
3 to 6,
go into the pit.
nothing happens. Mutation. You get a free mutation.
Which ain't bad.
You roll 1d6 again. On one, you lose a single point from a character characteristic chosen by you due to atrophy, such as degradation.
And on a roll 2, you get to pick
2,
which one you get fucked by, but...
Chaos Armor, that's actually pretty good.
That's
essentially,
really
it's the best armor. It's actually it's as good or better than Gromrindel.
It matches Gromrindel, but I think it doesn't inhibit mobility.
But does not affect your ability or cast spells. So if you get this on your magister, if you get this...
Mino thinks it's a good idea to take if you're a mercenary boy.
What?
Chaos Armor.
You can't.
You literally can't unless you're a possessed part of the Dark Carnival.
Oh God, I don't know what the fuck I was. I'm tired. I want to go. To
we're almost done. Thank God. Daemon Weapon, really powerful.
God.
Well, let's not hang on. Possessed, you literally become one of the possessed. You
but you get a +1 to all your attributes. You get a +1 to all your attributes. But
doesn't matter. Moving on. Mounted warriors, horses. Bro, we're like almost 4 hours. This is nuts.
Yeah.
Black powder weapon, misfires. I wasn't joking. On a roll of 1, if you misfire, you lose your fucking hand. Basically. Jammed, that's bad. Fut, you have to remove the shot.
And hey, on a 6, it just comes out with a bit more kick.
So, yeah, there you go. Fighting individual battles, here you go. Weapons and armor, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's just quickly move on to the play sheet. I just want to show you this, and then we'll call it here, because I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry it's nearly 4 hours, guys. This was deeper than I thought. And here's the basic roll system, the weapon skill roll. This is a really good cheat sheet when you actually start a fight. And with that, there was more, but we're not doing anymore because, yeah, it's been super fucking long. Sorry about that, my viewers.
From the way the chat is so active, at least it kind of implies they were interested.
You guys are having fun, but I'm not a fan of ultra long streams. It's a bit of a nitpick of mine. So we'll just quickly read through chat and then sign off.
Okay, hang on, the Skaven. Just checking. Rat ogres are basically what happens when you juice up a Skaven with warps. Don't forget Clan Scurvy, the pirates.
Clan Scurvy, the pirates, yeah.
Oh
yeah, from the disastrous naval game that only lasted an edition. Stack enough leg wounds
on your lizard, and you have a magic turret.
That's the only reason. Or you could go full Giga Brain and keep your Hotslander rifleman.
And that's Halt saying goodnight, but he'll watch the rest later. And in kick, wouldn't mind a Dice Scum TTS Mordheim League.
TTS Mordheim League. What does that mean?
Tabletop
Simulator.
I mean, that could be cool and all. Actually, yeah. I mean, I don't know any of that menu stuff, but I know that you're more familiar with that.
Worst case scenario, in Roll20, whatever.
I'll be straight. Yeah, I'll straight up admit minis aren't my jam, but there's several.
But hey, if you don't have to pay for them,
there's also the fact that several of the guys in the crew actually are. And I would not necessarily mind running not an Averlander, but I wouldn't necessarily mind running either a Possessed or a fucking mercenary band.
So. Man, let me tell you, ever since the days of Stigmata, I've always wanted to do another live game.
But anyway,
again. That would have been great.
The Tabletop Mordheim League, coming to you when I'm fucking dead and I'm resurrected as a zombie by Vampire Greg.
Jokes aside, it seems like at least the people who did watch and stick around were having a lot of fun, and I think that's the most important thing.
Point. And we kept under 4 hours. Next stream will probably not be so long because it's going to be a shit book. I'm sorry, guys. It has to be a shit book. This was great.
We were having a little too much fun today.
Yeah, this is an amazing book. It actually broke my hour rule so hard. We're actually very close to 4. So
how does it feel knowing we're never going to get good shit like this again from the company ever again?
It feels great, man. You know, I can't wait until we eventually read a book so good that it turns into an episode of EFAP and we're here for like 12 hours strung out on like the equivalent of meth.
Uh,
Hour 13 of reading this book.
Jokes aside, I'm glad everyone had fun tonight, and I'm glad that the first thing we've done from the company for Warhammer was a good one.
Yep, and next week I am coming up with a stupid gimmick called Choose and Lose, where I select some terrible books that I dug through the garbage, and some ideas that Tech Priest came up with, and we roll the dice. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna fucking hurt.
Fuck
Anyway.
you!
Good night.
Night, y'all.